Hey, hey. What is
Love
going
that
on?
intro.
Good evening, you guys.
Good evening.
It's a
All
great night to be
right.
streaming, everybody.
It is. It is
Well, I like that.
February the 9th, 2022. Um,
Yes.
we got some exciting stuff going on tonight.
Quentin.
There it is.
There we
Oh,
go.
dear Lord.
Go, go, Godzilla. Now can I go? How is everyone?
I hope everybody's doing well. Excellent.
We
Excellent.
are excellent. So, yes, we got a special guest waiting, but let's talk about what's new on the block, shall we? All right. All right. So pull up this. You've seen the card, live
Yes.
interactive listening party.
Hmm.
So we are all going to be able to listen to Fair Warning together tonight
Yep. In just a little bit. Yep.
with a special guest.
Yes.
A very special guest. Very special guest.
Yes. So, and all you have to do is to
Yes.
go queue up Van Halen Fair Warning and keep it on standby. Whatever your source of music is there, for me, it's just another window and more noise in the headphones, but it may be your home stereo or your Walkman or
Yep. It might take a few minutes and get all that stuff ready because it's going to be kind of hard to follow the conversation if you're not listening along with the album.
that's right. That's
Unless
right.
you're such a fan that you know all the words in your head and you're right in time.
So we are going to listen to Fair
Together.
Warning in its entirety, all 31 minutes and a couple few seconds of it together with
17.
our special guest.
Yep.
Yeah. And we'll be talking about it the whole way
Yeah.
before, during, and after. And it's a way that we can kind of duck and dodge around copyright issues here on YouTube that, you know, I can play mine at the same time that all of you can play yours and we can all enjoy it together.
Yeah. So when we start, Sandra will roll like a count in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 type of deal, and then everybody hit your play on it, and let's start the album going, and then we're gonna comment on it, and our special guest is here, and
Yeah.
talk
So
about little facts
we'll
and
show
information.
this a few more times, but we're looking to do this at after everybody gets here, probably at the 45-minute to an hour mark. You know, um, give us time to catch up with our special guest.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, who will be talking fair warning with us. Let's not wait any longer, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Gill, there he is.
Hey there.
Hey,
Welcome,
Chris.
buddy.
How's everyone
Excellent.
out there in internet land?
Good, man. How you
Yes, good
doing?
to see you.
Welcome.
Good to see you, Chris.
You too,
Yeah,
Charles.
Chris.
Man,
John and Sandra and fruitcake.
right out of the gate, I got to tell you, I am such a fan of your new book. I was talking to you a little bit earlier about it. I not only did I get the hard copy, but I went ahead and got the SoundCloud copy so I could listen to it on the road and things like that. You have not let me down at all. As a fan, I am absolutely blessed to have read your book.
Yes,
And
all of us.
I just wanted to give you a shout out just right out of
There
the
it
gate.
is.
Thank you so much for this book.
Oh,
Hey,
same,
Yeah.
Chris.
everyone for supporting it, and it's been hanging out on Amazon at decent numbers. You know, it's seems like it's going to be a perennial, which is good. That's what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be a reference book for people to go to. It wasn't the complete Eddie Van Halen story, at least from all the fine little minute details. It was really the big picture, you know, of Ed. And we wanted, you know, this for generations to come, you know, for people to figure out, who is this guy about? Who's this guy I've heard about? You know, that was really the idea of it. So it was for, you know, the newcomers as well as the hardcore fans. So that was, and again, I just have to thank everybody. It's been really successful, and the publisher's been really happy. So that's always a good thing, you know.
Yeah.
Publisher's happy. Maybe we'll get more Eddie Van Halen books, right?
Hopefully. Well, we've got John, you asked me earlier in the week about the paperback, and funny enough, I just happened to be scanning Amazon yesterday and saw that they're taking pre-sales on the paperback. Right. It's way off. It's going to be about a year to the day after the release of the book. It's coming out October 4th. So I'm still have to work out details if there's going to be any added extra, you know, bonus stuff, you know, for those of you who want to double dip, but for those of you who haven't paid yet, and, you know, it'll be a little bit cheaper and everything. So it's, but yeah, it's just kind of nice. That's, again, it's kind of a good sign of its success, is that, you know, it's now coming out in paperback for the masses now too.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's
Great
awesome.
news. Yeah,
We look back
great
in that often. I do. Yeah. And it is and will be reference ongoing.
Cool.
And thank you once again for that. It is a treasure.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing sordid or anything in your book. It's just, you know, it's just a great read. It's no, you know, usually when books are plugged, they pick like the, you know, some dramatic, you know, ugly kind of thing that, you know,
Sure,
that happened or something like that to sell
that's
books.
that's
But
the nature of the day today, and it was actually a blessing that our publisher was really fine with us not really dwelling upon that type of stuff, because so many books, you know, I've heard, like, even like back, gosh, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I remember, you know, Jazz Obrecht, I worked with him at Guitar Player magazine. He was talking about Carlos Santana. He wanted to do a book with Carlos Santana, and the publisher was only interested if it was going to be full of, you know, gossip and, you know, just all kinds of controversial stuff. They wanted drama. They wanted soap opera, you know, and that's not the kind of guy Carlos Santana is at all. And really, you know, as much as there is crazy stuff, you know, Ed was in a crazy rock and roll band for all these years and everything like that. And that was a big part of the early days, but a big part of what he wasn't about that stuff. You know, yeah, there's episodes out there and they're entertaining and they're fun for a moment. But if you look at the big picture of Ed, which again is what we wanted to do with the book, it wasn't to dwell on the fact that he threw up at his wedding, you know, or that he did drugs, whatever. Doing drugs is boring, really, when it comes right down to it, you know, and all this other stuff. It's like, it's fun for a while, but it's kind of juvenile, and it's antics. And hey, everybody kind of has those episodes in their life at some time or the other, usually, unless you're maybe, you know, the Pope or something. But the thing was to really concentrate on his musicianship and his genius as a composer, and, you know, the other parts of his personality that really made him the person he was, that drove him to become Eddie Van Halen, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, that other stuff is just window dressing, you know, but it's who is Ed? You know, what was he about? And that's what we really wanted to get into.
It's a credit to your publisher for allowing you guys to do that. And it's also a smart move by your publisher, because if you had put any of that sordid kind of stuff in there, it would be hard to take the book seriously as a reference book that we're all going to refer to, you know, like a historical document of his life, when, you know, with that kind of stuff in it. And the fact that you don't have that in there, it's a reference. That's what it will be. And it's a smart move by the publisher, because now, you know, people want to know about Eddie Van Halen. This is the go-to book. Like I said last time you were on, I said, you know, it doesn't look like the family is going to do any kind of authorized biography anytime soon. So this, you know, this is it. And I know they may have thought this was too soon, but I'm sure as time goes on, they're going to look back and say, you want to know about my dad? That's a good book to read right there, because it's in his own way.
Sure.
You know, in his own
It's, you know, Chris, the thing I noticed the most about it is, you know, you guys had a writing style back in the old days. And I'll say the old days, we're talking 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
Right.
The book holds true to your style. And originally in the old days, you didn't go for that salacious, sensationalized stuff anyway. You guys held true to exactly the same style that you had back in the day. That's one of the most wonderful things about reading this book for me, because back in the day, it takes me back.
That was
That book, you talk about going into this club, that club, I'm right there with you, man. Right there with you on it. And it's wonderful.
cool.
Absolutely wonderful.
Well, we also, you know, it's kind of funny because the guitar journalism thing, the Guitar Worlds and the Guitar Player magazines are kind of the bastard child of rock journalism out there. But we are musicians, you know, and I think that's part of it, is that we appreciate the art and the craft that goes into being a musician. And that's one reason why we got access to a lot of people over the years and everything like that, is because we weren't going to ask them about, you know, about their inner fighting and these struggles and whatever, you know, in the soap opera stuff, like a Rolling Stone or more of a, you know, mass market type of magazine would do. We really would dig into the nuts and bolts, you know, literally the, you know, the picks and strings, you know, as it were, out there. And I think, you know, some people didn't like that. I mean, that was kind of like a little bit later in the 90s where it was kind of like considered uncool to talk to the guitar magazines. But, you know, pretty much before and after that, that was kind of the place people came to, that when they really wanted to talk, because we do appreciate, you know, people as creative beings, you know, and we want to get to the essence of what their creativity is about and what their contributions are musically and culturally and that sort of thing.
Well, you guys you had a track record of being a trusted avenue for them to come to, because there was no internet or anything. So you had to have you had to make choices. Who you're going to talk to, who you're going to let represent you in the media, who you're going to let write about you in the magazines.
True.
So yeah, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a different world. You know, nowadays it's all about the, unfortunately, the 10-minute soundbite interview and that sort of thing, as opposed to the, you know, spending several days hanging out with somebody and maybe going on tour with them or going in the studio or that kind of thing. That's a luxury nowadays.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Well, like I always said, you know, you were, everything we know about these guitars and stuff like that of Eddie's and is all basically stuff that we've all, you know, none of us, any of these fans that are on any of these internet pages or shows or anything like that, it's not like we sat down and talked to Eddie about all these guitars. The only thing we know about all these guitars is stuff that we've got from you guys. So, you know, I mentioned this last time. I go, so, you know, thanks for that, because I would always wait for, when I knew a new Van Halen album was coming out, I knew there was going to be a Brad Twinsky or a Chris Gill article on Eddie, a cover story coming out. And I was waiting for that. You know, I'd always look, when's it going to be in the mail? When it's going to get here? When's it going to get here? You know, to see every
time a new album or new tour.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Well, then also, I mean, with EVH Company, that was kind of a fun thing, was to talk about the products. I mean, it's a guitar nerd thing, you know, and I saw, like, under the more general, you know, music fan things, people kind of complain about, oh, it's an infomercial or whatever. But it's like, man, imagine if you got to sit down with Jimi Hendrix and talk with Jimmy for 3-4 hours about guitar, only guitar, you know, and what made him tick and what did he like in a guitar and whatever. And that's what we got from Ed. You know, it's like the Wolfgang Project. That's amazing. I mean, I have to contact someone over at Fender, because they professionally filmed the whole thing and they only released like a few minutes of the interview that we did. But they had like the Hollywood lighting and they had the cameras on tracks and everything. Wow. And it was a great conversation that we had for a couple hours, just going back and forth, you know, between me and Ed and Matt Bruck and Chip Ellis, and just talking literally nuts and bolts, talking about the screws, you know, and whatever. And I guess, I can see why the average music fan's eyes are going to glaze over. But for a guitar player, man, it's just like, I mean, that's it, you know, especially for a guy who was so deeply involved with that, you know, with building his own guitars and that sort of thing. It really gives you quite an insight into the instrument.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to. I hope that, you know, I hope that they think about that and realize that if that was ever on YouTube, they'd be shocked at how many thousands of views that would get, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, the whole thing, it's just, you know, cause I have the audio of it, you know, and which is all great and everything, but it's like, just, you know, to actually see Ed talking, you know, and it just, the whole process was just really, you know, it was really, like I said, it was quite a phenomenal day, you know, just to sit there and just have this round table with those guys.
Wow. Outstanding, man.
So Chris, what's next up for you? What do you got? Anything going on?
I'm going to Paris.
Real?
Finally.
Nice.
Good for you.
That's about it. But yeah, I'm going to dig around, and whatever. But I don't really have anything just yet. We've talked about some other musicians, but it's pretty hard. Brad's covered a lot of ground with his books. The Jimmy Page book, obviously, and he did a book on Hendrix for Genesis Publications. I did a book with Clapton and
Right.
Jeff Beck for Genesis. So that covers a lot. That's between Clapton, Beck, Page, Hendrix, and Van Halen.
Yeah, you got them pretty much covered.
That's the big five, and like
Not
everything
Rush-
else
not-
is kind
not
of like
Rushmore, right?
they're all great,
Yes.
but they're a little bit diminishing returns, So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're kind of toying around with a few things. We've had a few ideas, a few things pitched to us, and Brad and I are kind of just hashing things out and trying to figure out what the next step is. But it's really kind of hard to top what has been done so far.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, we look forward to whatever
Absolutely.
it is. We'll all be there to read or watch or whatever whatever you're doing.
Cool.
This
Thanks.
is true. This is true.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very well.
So let's say hello, Sandra, to the kids in the chat. Um,
Nelson Rodriguez, hello.
Nelson, what's going
Hey,
on?
Will, the Dreamer's Life. Holly
Will.
Lewis, how you doing?
Holly.
Nightbot. Dwight Bailey, Hitman is in the house.
What's going on, Dwight?
Ed, hey Ed. Kurt,
Ed
5150.
Dubrow, what's up, Bill?
Tim Thomas, hey there. Guitar Man 45 is in the chat. Thomas Santiago.
Thomas, what's up, brother?
And anybody else that will come wandering in, we'll say hello. Christopher Livesaw, how could I forget?
Christopher, what's going on, bro?
He's posted emojis and so. Yeah. All right.
right on. All right.
And let's give a shout out to Bent Tom out there.
Prayers for Tommy.
Prayers for
Yes.
Tommy.
If you're watching or listening, we love you and miss you. So get better super fast.
Yeah, Tommy, love you, brother. Hey, Analog too. Hope
And
that
yes,
Analog's feeling better as well.
Yes, Chris, please.
Yeah, Analog too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Neil driving cross country. Too bad you couldn't be with us
Janice
tonight.
is
Be
lurking.
safe, man.
Yep, be safe.
Chris Bevan, hello.
So Tony,
All right. So,
Where is Neil going?
I don't know if it's a secret yet. I don't know.
I don't know.
He said details to come, so I don't want to say anything that I.
All right. Okay. Sorry, TK. Go ahead.
no. So, let me get out of here and get into here.
Let me
So,
get out of here.
in a little bit, everybody is going to have their Van Halen audio queued up for fair warning.
Yeah, get your stuff ready now, guys.
Yep. It's getting close.
Getting close. We're gonna kick this off soon here.
Yeah, so we're going to ask you to do that.
Go find your
Um,
headphones or your earbuds.
And we'll keep ours you won't be able to hear it if you are listening with no music, but we'll keep ours at a moderate volume so we can still talk. And, we encourage you to do the same so you can hear us talk.
Crank it up.
Couple little Van Halen related notes. I saw that Wolfgang Van Halen, Mammoth WVH, put a new video out today for
Yes,
one of the songs on the album.
Epiphany. And
Epiphany.
that link, by the way, I put it in the description in the
He did
show
it.
down there. So,
Cool.
yeah.
And he's been doing some press interviews, and he was asked today by a Canadian guy. What's his name?
Jeremy White.
Jeremy
Yeah.
White, of course.
Yeah.
Jeremy asked him. He had to sneak some Van Halen questions in there about the final album, because he said he had heard that there was a mix out there where Ed had his Plexi and the 5153, I guess, both mic'd, and they were mixing that up. But he said it's not true. Wolfgang said it was not true. There's no
Right.
mix out there of that. He said
Right.
he brought it one day and he decided, nah,
Yeah.
I'm not into it. I guess.
Right.
you know, like he says, you know, his taste definitely changed over the years, and at the end, it was a lot different than the beginning. So I guess he didn't really have any interest in going back to that, you know. So but he said that, and he also said, as far as he told Jeremy, as far as any extra songs or anything like that, he says there are none from that last album, because he said they did. There's one other song. He goes, but they didn't even finish it. He goes, everything else you got to hear. And in another interview, I was kind of interesting that he said that Dave didn't let them do many of the background vocals initially, and they let it go with that. And, you know, he thought it was kind of stupid because he said they were, you know, known for background vocals, the band Van Halen. He goes, but Dave was like singing a lot of the background vocals on there. He goes, but finally they just said, no, screw it. We're going to go in and, you know, and record some background vocals on it. And he mentioned the song You and Your Blues. That was one of the first ones that he was able to, and you can hear Wolfgang pretty prominently on there because you know, it's definitely not Eddie's voice singing that, you know, Your Bad Mood's Permanent, that part.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was surprised to see that they actually went in, because I did think that album was a little light on the background vocals, you know what I mean? You know, and knowing how Wolfgang can sing now, you know, it would have been, you know, it was kind of interesting to me to find that out, that it was kind of Dave who shot that down. And I guess, you know, there was a fragile, you know, peace thing going on there, so they didn't want to step on each other's toes. I don't even think they were in the studio. It sounded like at the same time for just maybe Stay Frosty, I think, was the only one that they kind of all worked on together, because I guess Dave had a demo of it, and Wolf said he basically arranged it. I guess, you know, he you know, got to do that, which was fun. But I guess, you know, Chris, you probably know more about that than us, but it sounded like everything with them, with the tours, where they would just do the sound checks themselves, and ultimately they would shake his hand as they'd walk out on the stage, do the show, and then see him the next night when they shook his hand again on the next show, really, you know?
It was two ships passing in the night, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. I guess that's what they kind of had to do, though, to get along and everything. But yeah, basically with the different kind of truth was, you know, the three Van Halens worked up at 5150, you know, hashed out all these instrumental tracks, presented them to Dave. Dave picked out, you know, what he wanted to work on. Of course, they also worked with the producer and everything like that to kind of collectively pick what they thought was the best stuff. And then Dave worked on the vocals separately. And there was really very little cross-pollination, so to speak. You know, it was really kind of almost like, you know, Dave could have been in an entirely different country altogether. He could have been off in Japan for the way things were working. You know, it was just really, even though he was just down the hill at A&M. But yeah, it was really kind of interesting process. And of course, the tour, as you mentioned, never ever did a sound check. He just would roll up on the bus, you know, not even hanging out backstage. At least the times I saw them, you know, Dave was not present. Dave was not in the building, you know, and his bus would roll up. He'd roll off a few minutes before the show, you know, do some jumping jacks and, you know, a little bit of, you know, vocal exercises, and then bam, off on stage. As soon as it was done, right out the back door, you know, 1 foot out the door, you know, and onto the bus. You know, I remember in Atlanta, 2012, you know, I went down underneath the venue. I can't remember the name of the venue now, but it was all kind of this underground area, and they had the buses parked there. And I came out and I was gathering up some of my camera gear and stuff like that, and saying my last goodbyes to the guys. And, you know, I just watched Roth just right onto the bus, and it just took off, you know, and the other guys were all kind of still milling about and hanging around and everything like that. And, you know, doing a little bit of the meet and greet type of thing, not a whole lot of that, but, you know, but it was really just, I was surprised just like how it was just really, man, do the show, get out of there, you know, for Dave.
Wow.
Yeah, so. I think, you know, it's just my thoughts are like when Ed built that studio 5150, I think they changed the whole game of the whole process of how he worked with probably any of the singers, because, you know, he could spend all night in there, whatever like that, and Alex would come. I almost feel like every song was the music was completely written, arranged, and demoed, and then handed to the singer, and basically they would just write their melodies and lyrics to that. And a lot of times it seems like a lot of the music he wrote dictated the melodies almost too, you know what I mean, for the chorus and stuff like that. I think they became masters at that, Eddie. I think that was, you know, not really a producer who would, a lot of bands would get involved with that stuff, but I think by the time they built that studio at home, I think that it seemed like everything was demoed and just given to the singer, and that's, you know, that's what basically how the song turned out. I mean, I don't know if they did
Partly less so with Sammy actually, and even less so with Gary Sharon. I mean, Ed really wanted someone to be there and work with him, and get down and dirty and everything like that, and bounce ideas off of. And he had that with Sammy for a while, but Sammy eventually, gravitated towards, wanting to be with his family and, enjoy his time off. And it just, the whole working rock band studio rat ethic just eventually wore on him. And that kind of, I think that's where they started to split a bit. But, Sammy had a lot of input actually on songs. And, there's a few things I think like Finish What You Started, I think is, if I recall properly, that was really kind of more of a collaboration, between the two. So, and Sammy, obviously with his career before that was really quite a songwriter. So he had a lot more going on, both musically and as far as lyrically going on. So he was able to contribute quite a bit in that respect.
Yeah,
and I think with Gary, I think, Ed found kind of the ultimate foil of a guy who was just willing to camp out at the studio with him. He lived, in the guest house for how many months, and everything. And, was just available for Ed 24/7. That's really what he wanted, but yeah, I think that was kind of how things kind of did develop though, was that he was really, especially as it became the three amigos, Ed and Wolfgang and Al, just again, they got back to that. Hey, let's just do a bunch of jams, put the stuff out there and do all the music stuff. And, that worked out great for the arrangement with Dave.
Yeah. I was reading as a matter of fact, it was your article today. It's the 10th anniversary of The Different Kind of Truth. And Guitar World put up one of your interview from 2012, I guess.
Right.
And basically they said they cut like 35 demos, I guess, right? Just probably the three of them just playing live, right? 35.
Yeah.
And then
that's what I wonder about what Wolfgang says, because I know how they worked. And yes, they weren't finished songs per se. They didn't get presented to Roth. And,
that's not what he said in that interview.
Yeah, because I from what and I believe what Ed said was that he really they worked these songs out. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they didn't record all of them. I don't know, but it sounded to me like they recorded demos, musical backing tracks, basically the karaoke experience, essentially. For Dave to go do his karaoke, basically. But I think that's the thing, is that I think maybe that's what I'd love to talk to Wolfgang really and kind of probe a little deeper about that and find out. I mean, was that the case? Was it? I mean, what is with these? Why did Ed say 35 songs? There weren't 35 songs. Was he exaggerating, or
right.
I think there was quite a bit of stuff, because they were working. I mean, just around the clock, and I could easily see them banging out, 30 songs over the amount of time that they spent working on pre-production and so forth.
What Ed's calling 35 songs may not be what Wolf's calling.
Yeah, they may be a riff. It may just be like, hey, we worked out a riff or whatever, and it maybe wasn't a complete finished song, but it was an idea, and we've seen that with Ed so many times. The riff. I'm trying to remember the song that it became Dirty Water Dog eventually, but he gave it to Lukather, and he played around with it with Sammy. And it bounced around for quite a bit. And even tonight, we'll talk about some stuff that was examples of that, where it's like, okay, here's a riff from one song that ended up being used for this, and how they put this piece from this song and put it over here. And, that was a very typical type of thing for them to do too. So.
Hey, Chris, we have a couple of questions from Holly Lewis in the chat. Number one, she wants to know if the racquetball court was existing or was it built after the fact up at Eddie's? And then she asked another question. She'd like to know if you know who actually named the song Eruption.
That's a good question. Oh, about the racquetball thing, it was actually, the plans were submitted for it to be a racquetball court. It never really was a racquetball court. It was a ruse. So it was that's what they told the city planner or whoever they had to go to, to get it approved to build it, that they were building a racquetball court.
That is so LA.
Plans as a racquetball court, but of course what they built was something entirely different. And I know that, not even LA, as I know one of my good friends who's a wine producer up in Napa. He lives up in the mountains up there, and he has a cave, a wine cave. But of course he built this, he's a big guitar collector and studio rat and everything. He built this big, huge room inside of the mountain up in Howell Mountain up there. And he submitted plans that just said storage. right? But it's a
Excellent.
full-fledged recording studio and performance space and all this other stuff,
Wow.
but he got, past the approval stage by just calling it storage.
Jeremy White asked Wolfgang today. He asked, would you ever allow your 5150 for bands to record there, your friends or whatever bands to record there? And he said no. He goes, it's not in the plans. He goes, it's private property, folks. It's not like a commercial, because it's just a home studio on a private. It's kind of small too, I guess, when it comes to studios, right? So
yeah.
But,
it's small. It's by commercial studio standards, it's small, but it's a good studio.
It's gotten bigger over the years too, right?
It got bigger over the years, and everything. And it's not a huge space, but it's about I'd say like about the C size, the C studio in a commercial facility or something like that. It's about that size, which is it's not bad. It's a good size.
Yeah, I think he's renovating it now too. I saw some pictures. It looks like the control room. There was a tarp over the board, so they were doing
He's
some renovation.
Putting a new console in, I think. So
Yeah.
So I guess it's not entirely blasphemous because Ed took out the old original thing and put an SSL in there and whatever. Now they're taking the SSL out and put something else in there and so on. But that's studio technology,
I have one last thing about a different kind of truth. So I guess. The fragile relationship with Roth, and that's why they agreed to do it at Henson, I guess, in A&M or Henson, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But I thought I read it in Guitar World probably that Ed recut all the guitars at 5150. Is that true? That he
pretty much, I don't know the exact timeline of it, but obviously they did the guitars first and all the instrumental tracks, and then they submitted to Dave, like I said, and then Dave did the karaoke thing. And I think after the fact, Ed wasn't entirely happy with his guitar stuff, so I think he did go back and recut things and try some reamping and various other approaches that they did. But yeah, I think there was he did go back and recut some things over again and just polish them up and add a few extra tracks and that sort of thing. Right. And on the eruption thing, I don't know for sure who named it, since I had to bust at Dave's chops about taking credit for the striped paint job on the Frankenstein. Yeah. I'll give Dave the credit for that since I took it away from him on what he tried to claim on the Frankenstein. So, but I really don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because that Jeremy White interview, he did another one with Steve Vai yesterday, and Vai says in there that Dave wrote, I guess, made it sound like he wrote "Ain't Talking About Love," the two chords there, that was Dave, and also Jamie's crying, the guitar part where he's going, right. But that's basically the melody. So it's like, okay, maybe Dave had the melody for something. Eddie was so that one I don't really get. But Ain't Talking About Love, Ed always said that it was like he was embarrassed to show it to the band because it was like a 2-chord punk song. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
2-chord. Yeah. But and this thing with if you guys, anybody out there gets a chance, look at Jeremy White's show on YouTube, and during the interview, Vi does allude to that. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's kind of like Dave's kind of taking credit for a lot of stuff lately.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, but it's also who knows what. I mean, I do know. I now will give Dave a lot of credit for this. Is that back they had that lull between when they did the demos, as we've mentioned in previous interviews, but there was that lull between when they did the demos and they recorded the first album in starting in late August, early September, that they started tracking, and they went out and they were club rats. They went to the Whiskey. And they saw the punk bands that were playing there. And during that period, they wrote, their punk songs, basically. Ain't Talking About Love was Ed's attempt to write a punk song. Instead of doing a 1-chord song, he did a 2-chord song. He just couldn't keep things that simple. Lost of Control was one of the other ones, and Atomic Punk, of course. And that was really heavily influenced by what they were hearing at this scene. And they were thinking, well, let's do something semi-contemporary or whatever, but it still was Van Halen. So it got hot rodded and got a big 357 engine dropped in there. It may have been like an old, Model T or whatever, but man, they were just pumping that thing up. So typical fashion that they did. But I think there probably was a little bit more collective of an effort on that. And I think Dave really pushed that sort of thing, as we saw, especially later, when he was going to the Zero Gallery and things like that, and the kind of people he was hanging out with and everything, that Dave was really always that kind of guy that was really much more open into the whole punk and new wave scene that was going on in LA.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. What else did I have? I had another one for you. Let me think about this. I was just thinking about it a second ago, too. I don't even remember what I was going to ask you.
You'll remember.
We'll come back to it.
It'll come back.
You guys almost ready to kick this off?
Yeah. Later on, too, we'll run some Van Halen trivia.
Oh boy, fun
for you. I hadn't shown you this, Chris, but I've shown the rest of them. But yeah, I keep saying I'm gonna make these harder and harder, but I think I might have them this week.
Cool.
I think I'm the winner this week.
Good. Cool.
But we'll see. But we'll run that later on. Do we want to do this? Kids, have you all got fair warning up in another window or on the boom box next to you? Yeah. Okay, so are we ready to jam out to fair warning?
I'm good to go.
Yeah.
All right. So kids, for the next 31 minutes and umpteen seconds, we'll be listening and still talking. We'll be listening to fair warning in its entirety. Yeah. And we'll get Chris's take on this album. So are we ready to start this, John?
Yeah, let's go. Count us in. Everybody get ready.
All right. All right. So we're going to count this down, and you start yours at home, and we'll start ours here, and we'll all count it down together. It doesn't have to be in sync, but we'll follow along. You'll know where we are along the way. We're not going to pause for any reason. For 31 minutes. Are we ready?
Let's go.
All right. Okay, so let's count her down.
All right, I'm hearing it.
the crazy muted tapping, which Ed said he kind of got through osmosis from hearing a funk slap bass on the radio. Of course, that feedback, that harmonic, that whatever he's doing there, that noise, man, beautiful, and that reverb.
I think that's maybe more impressive than Eruption. Personally, I really think this is amazing.
And a little known thing, and he never really gets credit for this. Everyone talks about the melodic tapping that Ed did, right? The percussive tapping that he did on Mean Street. That got picked up by a whole generation of acoustic guitar players, people like Michael Hedges.
Mhm.
And it goes on, especially throughout the 90s. You saw these people that were doing that kind of tapping.
Yeah.
It was kind of this cross-pollination of flamenco and slap bass and Eddie, But Eddie is the guy who really opened the doors to people for that. This is a generation who grew up on that.
Very percussive, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Then
And,
that
you know,
riff, the
so
riff, of course, Voodoo Queen.
right.
That was from '77, wasn't it? From a demo.
That was recorded. Voodoo Queen, I think it was a little bit earlier than that.
I know that the vocals on that were different.
Yeah.
The riff was essentially the same.
The riff was pretty much the same, yeah.
Yeah.
But the vocals and lyrics were different, yeah.
And there's so many so many songs that Van Halen did that are from that nature, where they had them years before. I was in the Whiskey A Go-Go in 1981. It was the break after the end of that tour in 81. And so it would have been just before 82, actually. And Dave was writing lyrics on the wall with an El Marco. He did it on several occasions.
Sure.
And the lyrics were surprisingly like Jump. So he was he was a year and a half ahead before they were in the studio doing that album, writing lyrics from a song that hadn't even come out yet.
Never let a good idea go. I mean, that's the thing. It's like even later in the career, and of course, A Different Kind of Truth was, they brought back a lot of that stuff, and it's kind of a different approach, with Roth writing different lyrics and everything. Some of the songs remain the same, but a lot of them got changed and some of them dramatically, like Tattoo, for example, was Down in Flames, basically.
Wasn't the ending of this originally what they used on Hot for Teacher on the album? Was that
not this song? Voodoo Queen was, though.
Voodoo Queen was
for Hot for Teacher, yeah.
Yeah. And you know what, Chris, I wanted to point out, so this album, we all know that Ed wrote tons of stuff before they were signed, all this stuff, this wealth of material. By this album, they were kind of running low. It was a slimmer pickings, obviously. They didn't, most of this album is pretty new, right? Except for this song. I think what else is old on this,
Nothing really. Yeah. This was Ed taking the bull by the horns, basically. This was Ed's big statement. I kind of look at the first 6 albums, the 6-pack, right, as kind of a package of 2 trilogies. And you have the first 3 albums, which were kind of like, we're the club band, we're going in down and dirty and cutting an album as quickly as possible. And here you get a little bit of this dynamic. Obviously, Diver Down went back to that, right? But this album was Ed like embracing the overdub and seeing the studio as an instrument and expanding as a guitar player and just really expressing himself. And this is kind of the start of Ed, almost as a solo artist of sorts, making a big statement, and of course he's the guy who stayed behind after hours in the studio and for weeks and lost, his weight was down to 125 pounds,
right?
By the time this album was finished. And of course, this is where the bromance between Ed and Don Landy really blossomed, because they were spending all this time together down in the trenches and just digging each other and creatively pushing each other.
So I don't know how long it was between the end of the Women and Children First tour and when this album was released. So I'm imagining that, here's the crazy thing about this. The crazy genius about this is a lot of this, he may have written on a bus too, right? A lot of these riffs and stuff in the back of the bus.
Yeah.
And even in the studio, actually.
April of 81.
That's incredible. I mean,
the bulk of this album was actually written in the studio. I do want to add that the bridge in here, it was lifted from She's the Woman. Right. And of course, when they went to record that later, they had to write an entirely new bridge, which is what Wolfgang did. So that's another little trivia thing there for Mean Street. Yeah. And of course, now this is one of my favorite songs on the album, and for reasons I can't go into. But
excellent.
Chris, so one other thing too on this, actually, Tony, while you have that up there, so I guess Templeman would pick the song order. That was always his deal, but I guess they would submit it and then they would change their mind at the last minute. But I think these are like what Templeman originally had envisioned to have, like, So This Is Love, the second, because it was more like a single, I guess, right?
I could see that. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Greg Renoff, I think, points that out in his Templeman book. Greg Renoff mentioned that. And if you notice, I was looking even up to 5150, and I think even though Ted didn't do that, I think they went to Ted and asked him. I think Greg Renoff said that to order the songs, and then what you see on the back of the 5150 album is not the order of the on Diver Down. It's the same thing. It's like a different order than what actually appears on the album. But I think that's Ted did that, and I think at the last minute he always changed his mind after they sent it to the printer or whatever like that. So
Ed started to put his foot down a lot more creatively too. If I recall properly, I think that Ed was involved in the mixing on this album too.
Right.
Which was the first time, it's like he was really much more involved in the creative process with Don. Don was starting to get him even doing stuff behind the board, and that started to worry Ted quite a bit. I think, it was just like, oh man, it's like, I just want him to be out there and play guitar, and everything. And now he's like kind of going off in this other direction.
Chris, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
This is kind of going a little bit deep here, but this is what I noticed about Ed. I noticed it okay, this album we're talking about right now and we're listening to is the first album after he had actually met Val. I believe he was engaged to her while this album was being actually produced.
Yeah.
And they got married
right afterwards, pretty much.
Afterwards.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a question and an observation, and if you want to elaborate on it, I would love it. Do you notice him that I swear Ed matured in 6 months? He went from being immature to very mature. His wardrobe changed, the way he dealt with the press, the way he spoke. And I do kind of feel in my heart that Val had a lot to do with that. And I think it was a positive thing for him. I think she was helping him. I've heard some, a lot of over the years, especially like on YouTube now, I'll hear people make comments about this particular album we're listening to and how it's a dark album. It's a negative album.
But is it though? That's the thing. I think at this point, this is the point I want to bring up. Actually, is like, okay, I think the album gets this reputation as being a dark album for several reasons. One, the cover, of course, is just like, man, that's dark, and that's the other thing. I don't know if people know this, but Al actually designed that. Of course, if you've ever seen the original painting that was taken from it, he kind of did a collage with it and took out key parts and blew them up and made them bigger. Because like the guy being punched is actually like a tiny little piece on the original piece of artwork, But I think there's that. And then you look at the song order and you start off with Mean Streets. And then you've got Dirty Movies, as you hear now. And everybody's thinking like, gosh, this isn't really kind of a light party album. This is kind of heavy. And of course, the sound's a lot heavier than it was the previous. I think it's partially also the contrast between Women and Children First, because you had a lot of this kind of breezy stuff, on it. You had the Happy Trails, and you had, God, I'm trying to remember the song titles, but but it's just, like the last part of the album in particular was just kind of this breezy, and it was kind of almost jokey, and this album's very serious.
His tone is more gainy on this album too. It's more
gainy, and his playing's more jazzy. But I think about the Valerie thing. Yes, I think Ed was really looking for someone to kind of calm him down a little bit, and I think that's what he got.
Another little tidbit. I'd like to know if this is true. Michael Anthony has the one member of Van Halen who married his childhood sweetheart and didn't ever have the problems that the other guys in the band had in many ways.
Right.
He was always the grounded guy. And I noticed that when Ed announced his engagement to Val, the only, other than Ted Templeman, only other than him, Michael Anthony was the only one who supported him. And Alex and Dave really weren't privy to the whole thing. They didn't dig it at all, actually.
I don't know about Al not digging it, but Dave definitely didn't, because Dave was, there was already tension between the guys. And I think this is where it really started to boil over, where I think Ross saw this focus on Ed, with all the Guitar Magazine accolades, and, all of a sudden he's, dating a celebrity,
They're sort of losing control.
Yeah. And it was just like, and Ross thought he was going to be the one to marry a movie star, and he was expecting this to be, kind of this thing, and he wasn't really quite getting that. And that's where I think there was started the shift. And of course, then with this album, Ed, again, becoming the studio rat and pretty much taking control of the record. This is where the tension, starts.
I consider this a defining moment in his guitar playing. This transition from 82 to 83. That's just so definitive.
And I think the Guitar Hero accolades really sunk in. I mean, Ed was always a great guitar player, but now it's like, man, I really have a reputation to live up to. Let me deliver. And that's what he did. Again, Sinner's Swing is another. These three songs, 1, 2, 3. Even though this is kind of a jazzy, swinging, up-tempo song, but it's still kind of, I can see where the people kind of have this impression of the Dart, thing. But
Yeah.
This song would not sound out of place on the first Van Halen album, though.
I don't can really consider it personally any darker than anything else. I think they,
Yeah.
you know, the beginning song, the opening song to every Van Halen album sets a tone for the album.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, whether it's a sound of a horn coming out and Running with the Devil, or it's
Right.
and the Cradle Will Rock, you know, you've got this really cool riff, or you've got maybe an ascending bass line coming up out of the depths. They all have their definitive start. This was the same. It was just
and this was the same twice over, because Unchained could have started this album just as well, and they started off many of their sets with that song. But it's like side A and side B just both kick off with killer songs, you know, just killer up tempo, grab you and take you for a ride type of songs.
And this album has a couple of songs on it. I believe Center Swing, the last time I heard them play that live, unless I'm wrong, guys, was 83. I just kind of dropped it off the radar.
I'd have to check the set list FM on that, you know, but I think you're right. I think you're right.
I'm pretty sure I am. I've seen him quite a few times between 81 and between 80 and 84. And I didn't hear it in 84. I didn't hear Mean Street in 84, which I was just dying to hear. I was waiting for it. But what I did hear
in 81, though, the second song of the set, they marched right into Center Swing.
Yes, exactly. So there's a couple of songs that they've dropped off that Wolfgang actually brought back in 2015. I think it was 2015. And he brought them back up out of the depths, and he actually played them, real obscure songs and things.
The deep cuts, you know,
real deep.
This song, this is a Stratocaster.
With
the MXR flanger. But again, it's, you know, it's a different tone. And again, this isn't really dark, you know.
No,
this is kind of beautiful and elegiac, you know. It's kind of ethereal, you know.
Yeah, you're right. This album I was going to mention earlier, this is really the first album where there was a lot of drop D tuning. This may have been, I mean, you know, I'm trying to think what before was drop D on any of the first.
Nothing. No, it was all standard tuning.
I mean, that also adds to the darkness of the album.
That might add a little bit to what people think is the darkness, to that chugging D. You know,
it's heavier. You know,
it is heavier, right?
Yeah.
That's I love this song.
I mean, that's the thing. I think it's this side as much as anything. Because again, you know, hear about it later. It's got a little bit of a, you know. It's not as breezy of a lyrical, you know, matter here. So,
right.
I think if I recall, the intro to Mean Street actually morphed into part of his guitar solo.
Yeah.
84. Was that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
You always did that, right? Yeah. One thing I wanted to add before we get off this side was on Dirty Movies. So Chris, he hacked up the SG on that one, right?
Yeah, the SG Junior on that. It's such a great story, and it just tells you all about Ed. You know, is that he's working on the slide part. You know, that you hear, and you know, you heard him play a little bit. I mean, it's amazing how well he mastered slide for a guy who that wasn't his bag. You know,
right.
But he was playing it, and he wanted to go that really high part, that kind of, you know, that stuttering kind of thing. You know, and he just kept on hitting the horn with his left hand. And, you know, most players would try and figure out a way around it or something and move their body or their hand or whatever. And it's like, you know, he said to various people, but I think it was to Don, where he said, like, give me that. You have a hacksaw anywhere? And it's like, what do you want with the hacksaw? And he's just like, took it to the, you know, this guitar and just hacked the horn off. So it was just like, you know, this big cutaway, you know, so he could just get right up there.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It was like no sentiment at all. It was just like, it's a tool. I'm going to make it do what I want it to do, you know, and that was just Ed, you know. And I saw so many vintage guitars, and he even did that with his 59, you know, Les Paul, where he took the pickup, you know, out of it, took the pickups out at various times and put them other places, and, you know, just no reverence, you know.
And I want to add, this is the first album that you can Alex's voice, his snare drum, that voice is really appears to my ears. That, you know, that signature sound, like maybe he had it, but it didn't. You could hear a little bit on the first album and stuff. I thought the drums didn't sound as good on the second album as the first, although I thought the guitar sounded more fierce on the second album than it did on the first. You know, but I think that this album is when it really starts to reveal itself. And then on Diver Down, you can really hear that snare. It's like. It's arrived. His signatures, you know, his voice.
Well, he was developing his voice too as things went along. Yeah. You know, that was the thing. It was just these guys were really, I think, embracing the position that they were in. It was like no longer trying to sound like somebody else, like they did in the club days. Even then, they didn't really try to sound like somebody else, but they couldn't help but sound like themselves. But then they really embraced we are Van Halen. And I want to sound like this. I want my snare to sound like this. I want it to punch out of the mix like this,
And Michael Anthony too, because this album, on the first 3 albums, I guess he was an SVT, but it was very slappy. You could hear the strings slapping on the fingerboard. It was on this album, you don't. It's way more refined sound. And you listen to
smaller
the bass.
amps. He was using smaller amps then instead of the big SVT. Like it was less the stage rig like they were using before. And they were embracing the studio. It's like, okay, now I'm going to use the smaller amps. It's probably a flip top and, a lot more direct.
A little more muting and palm muting or something with the bass. It's just that it doesn't like flop around the notes as much either. I noticed.
And the other thing is that there's been speculation, but I don't believe that Ed really started playing bass on the records. Even though I know he said he wasn't really happy with Mike's playing, but I think that he didn't really start doing the bass himself until 1984. I think he respected. Mike's position now, Unchained.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you say?
Sure.
The perfect Van Halen song.
It is really one of the just perfection, and that the way he kicks the flanger in and how it just comes in perfect timing.
Yeah.
And it just how things were with that. The cosmos lined up,
Unchained to me is the quintessential complete Van Halen package. It not only is it a badass song, but it reflects the comedy that was Van Halen. One of the biggest memories I have of seeing the Roth era Van Halen was seeing Dave be Dave. He was hilarious. He'd tell jokes. It was like seeing a comedy show.
Oh yeah, no, my friends they loved that about him. The whole, how do you do? That whole thing.
And so. That interchange on the studio album, one break coming up.
Yeah.
That just reflects it on the studio, but live, it's also a personal reflection that you see at the show.
That's what they made the records feel like a show. They paced them like a show. They sequenced them like a show.
I did hear somewhere that that part in that break in the middle that come on, Dave, give me a break. That it wasn't as spontaneous as we've been led to believe.
Yeah, well, come on. That's that's showbiz, man.
Right, you got it. Exactly. It's a little more showbiz than we've been led to believe. You know what I mean?
The story I heard was that Templeman was in a really, really loud suit, and Dave was giving him a hard time for a little while about it, and then finally there was an exchange back and forth, and it was so funny that everybody made note of it, and they talked about actually choreographing it onto the actual recording. I don't know how
he's got an octave pedal on here for the solo too, an octave pedal, right?
Yeah. I think he actually used the harmonizer, the Eventide on that, and of course he got the Boss Octaver to do that on stage. So that was kind of, but yeah, there was definitely the octave in there.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess he started using the Eventide even earlier than this, right? I think it is on Women and Children a little bit, right?
A little bit, yeah. I think it was still pretty new to the studio and everything, and that was kind of, I think Don was starting to introduce Ed to a lot of these kind of the processing and everything, and this separation and a bigger sound and that sort of thing.
Right.
Are you guys all on Unchained right now?
Oh yeah.
Come on, Dave, and break.
Yeah.
Coming up. That's where I am.
You kids in the chat, all right?
But the funny thing about this album is that in the United States, Warner Brothers saw fit to only release, I think it was Hear About It Later, I believe, or So This Is Love, I think was, if I recall right, was the only single that they released. But I remember hearing this song on rock radio back in the day, and I went back and checked. This song in Mean Streets actually got a lot of rock radio airplay at the day.
It did in L.A. It did in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
I'm sure
in LA, I was in LA and San Diego at the time, so I heard Unchained all the time on the radio. I could have sworn it was a single, and I don't know why, except for I think they were trying to. The Warner Brothers kind of wanted to kind of mold Van Halen more towards this pop direction and everything. So
yeah, it was.
What else sounds like this song out of the Van Halen catalog?
Yeah,
which one you're talking about? Push comes to shove, you're talking about?
Push comes to shove.
What else? No.
Nothing. I mean, where did this come from? It's crazy because you've kind of got this disco meets reggae kind of thing going on.
I think it's a Dave thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I almost think it's an answer to what was going on at the time. Because I mean, you look at the Stones. It was like,
True.
what's that? I Am a Knight in Shining. Emotional Rescue. It's kind of
Moscow especially. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they were, and then the reggae thing. Bob Marley had just passed away, and I think reggae was kind of like now people knew about it. So I think they were like, okay, it's. But the solo in this song is one of his most.
It's amazing.
This might be one of his greatest. It's definitely top 10 Eddie solo, I think. In here.
And back in the day, Ed said that actually on that solo was his favorite on this record, and this record had his favorite guitar solos.
Yeah,
like as a catalog, it was just like this. I don't know that he might have changed his mind after 1984, perhaps, but at least at that time, he was saying these are my favorite solos. And this particular song, Push Comes to Shove, was his favorite on the record.
Yeah.
And then this part here, I mean,
oh, this is totally insane. Brilliant. Listen to this, right?
This song gets in your head and it'll be there for a week.
And that tone, when did Ed ever do that tone? I mean, that's like LA Studio Cat, it's completely, it's like a Landau part or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say Michael Landau, right?
I don't think they ever played this live.
I don't think so either.
Good question. Again, Setlist FM, had to check that out. So
Never.
Somebody look it up. Somebody Google it.
I never heard it between 80 to 84. Let's put it that way.
No, it was
played once. So, well, I wouldn't have heard it before 80, before the album was made, but I never heard it.
KXM Rock, you're saying H3000. This album was way before the
H3000. Yeah, it was like the 949 or whatever. Yeah,
I think that up to 5150. I think he used the 949, right? And then H3000, I think, came out right around.
That came out. That was mid 80s, definitely. That was like I remember because Vi, of course, wrote the catalog for that. Wrote the Bible for the H3000, basically.
Yeah. The solo's coming up here for me. I don't know about everybody else.
I'm in it right now. So
I like
those harmonics.
I love these lyrics on this record.
He goes from being Landau to being Holdsworth in the course of one song. With the little
that is something we should look into. You guys is doing a show on Roth lyrics sometime in the future.
Yeah,
because that would be a whole show.
Yeah.
Listen to that solo, man.
Been 40 days and 40 nights since someone used my first name, including you.
The best, man. The best.
But it's so much more sophisticated, than anything they had done to that point too. And it was just, it was amazing, that just how much variety that they could put on their records. And I think, again, like I said, this record kind of sets the template for 1984.
Yeah.
It's kind of okay, it's really, this was Ed branching out and expressing himself as a musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you got, so This Is Love coming up. And the part that everybody else points out is when that snare drum that drops out. I don't know if there was a gate or something on it that at the beginning, when it gets real quiet, the snare drum at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's coming.
It just kind of like mixes down.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
It just disappears for a minute there.
It's one of those things, though. It's kind of like the beginning of Roxanne, where it kind of speeds up a bit, and everything too, or whatever. It's one of those things where you think it's just one of those mistakes in the studio where they're like, "Whoops," and like, "Well,
it's awesome,
kind of cool," I kind of like that.
Did they turn it down, or did the musicians did Al just let off?
Yeah. Did like someone tap him on the shoulder, like, what?
It's funny. You think that there wouldn't be any kind of mistakes on these albums, but there was. On 1984, right? I'll Wait. He overdubbed the cymbals and the hi-hats all on that, right? Because they wanted a nice clean recording. That's why the snare sounds so phenomenal on I'll Wait. And he forgot to hit that crash when the vocals came in.
Yeah.
And Ed said, "Oh, yeah." Ed said, "Oh, I think that's cool. Everybody's expecting the crash cymbal there. Don't leave it that way." So
yeah.
Right when that tom roll comes in, right when the vocals start, and then you're waiting for the crash, and there's no crash, So
I remember them playing this in 81 and 83, and I was anticipating it in 84, and they didn't play it.
Oh,
didn't play it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs.
Here in the chorus.
The one that the Warner Brothers invested in, pretty much. So, if I recall right, so
this is another piece together solo, I think, right? With like four things like Don spliced it together.
Yeah, this is where I think Ed, I believe, I don't know, Ed's told the story very differently, like where I think it was like on this or even on Diver Down, he said, but I think it might have been this song actually where he's talking about where Don's just showed him how to punch in, you know, from the different takes and everything like that, how to do a comp basically. Right. And he let Ed do it himself, you know, and that's when Ed really started to get worried, he says, you know.
Yeah, right.
It's hard to tell because you listen to it and it all flows, you know, and you can see Ed playing it, you know, even after the fact. It wasn't like an Adrian Blue thing where it's like an impossible guitar part, you know, or whatever.
This is that song that you would sit in front of the MTV. In my case, as a middle schooler, and wait for hours for this, or either Unchained or hear about it later.
Yeah.
And nothing dark about this song.
Nothing at all. No. I mean, even I think it was Boston said something about how it's a question, but it's like, but it's like, so this is love, you know, that's not bad. Right. It's like, hey, that's, you know, actually, hey, this is better than I thought. You know, I mean, it's a question, but it's an open-ended question. You know, it's not like, oh, so this is love. You know, no, it's not like that. It's more like, hey, all right, you know.
This is the closest thing to a love song you will ever hear David Lee Roth do.
True, absolutely, absolutely.
And the great ending.
Yeah. And then, of course, the probably the only platinum album featuring the Electro Harmonix microsynthesizer.
Right.
Wow.
Which even Ed admitted was basically a toy. But Ed could make it work, you know.
Didn't he say that when Al was hitting the kick drum because he was hitting it so hard that it was kind of triggering that thing?
Yeah.
You hear it when he hit the kick. It's like bo bo bo.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I don't know if you guys, the Electro Harmonix has the app out, and they have this preset for Sunday afternoon in the park for anybody that doesn't know that.
Cool.
Electro Harmonix mini synthesizer, and up at the top you go to Sunday. I think it's called Sunday Afternoon, and you can play around with it. It's pretty cool. We've messed around on here before with it. Sunday Afternoon, it's called.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's funny to hear this because it's just like, again, you know, it's just a departure.
Yeah.
You know,
if you were to hear this and you didn't know it was Van Halen, you'd never guess it was.
Never guess. No.
Never in a million years.
Well, even
we all know what came later, but what was Ed saying about this at the time, Chris?
You know, he basically just commented about, you know, the fact that he just used this cheap synthesizer plugged into a Marshall stack, and that was about it. Unfortunately, I think this is, I don't want to call it a throwaway per se, but it was really kind of a half-baked idea. And I think it was almost like, oh, I spent so much time on the other stuff. I need to fill up another 4 minutes, you know? And so you have these two kind of half songs at the end, you know, right. And this song in particular really sounds kind of like a sketch, you know, like I'm kind of working something out here. And it's really just Ed and Al.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, then of course it morphs into One Foot Out the Door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can tell he loved those grungy keyboard sounds like that, because look at Why Can't This Be Love? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. This is definitely kind of the precursor to Why Can't This Be Love, you know, with a much more expensive synthesizer.
You got it. Yeah.
As you know now.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're right. They are kind of like two half songs.
Yeah, it's like this song just, you know, we'll get to the ending here and it fades, you know, and it's just kind of like, it's just getting going.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the funny thing, because it's like Ed's playing a guitar riff, you know, and this song would sound as good, if not even more incredible on guitar, but he decided to do it on this, again, this toy of a synthesizer for some reason.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But you can hear a difference in just playing like that little riff he did there. He kind of does the same thing on Sunday Afternoon in the Park, where he kind of does that little melodic line where it's just, you know, it's a keyboard thing. Then this solo.
Yeah.
Again, another killer solo, which is almost the reason why the song exists, is for the solo when it comes right down to it.
That's
right.
Right.
Almost like you know, what gives this album maybe the idea that people have of it is it's almost like a concept prog kind of thing when you throw this on the end of the album too. It's like, it's just like,
well,
kind
of
of
like
commercial, you know,
yeah,
not commercial at all. This kind of stuff here, you know?
Yeah. Now, this is, of course, another Van Halen album without an instrumental on it, and of course we get to Diver Down, and that has 3 instrumentals on it, and but I think this song would have been actually, no disrespect to Dave or anything, I think it would have been better though as an instrumental. I think it would have been cool just to hear that riff and Ed playing guitar over it the whole time. That would have been an incredible thing. But that's it's hindsight. So
yeah, you're right. Because it would have been a full band instrumental too, which they only had. Really, the only other one I could think of is that Beluchatherium, where it's just the band kind of
right.
Yeah. And all of us who saw the Fair Warning tour were treated, unknowing at the time, but were treated to Cathedral. Many nights during the solo.
It was starting to ferment,
Well, there you have it, everybody. Fair warning.
All right, so we are complete, and there you have it. We're done with our first ever interactive listening party.
I'm amazed at how kind of things synced up in the end of it. I mean, mine finished and yours finished and everything.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a couple of seconds off. We
exactly
hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did, and there'll be more of this to come.
Guys, we got to just sit here and listen to Fair Warning with Chris Gill. Are you kidding me? This is so cool.
Exactly.
It would have been nice. I always, that's my one regret. I mean, there's so many regrets about Ed passing and everything, and all the albums I wanted to revisit, but this album in particular, I was just really wanted to, because there, I've read Stephen Rosen's interview with him at the time and everything like that, and it's got bits and pieces of some nuggets. It's got some interesting stuff in there, but it's not the deep dive that we want on this record. We really want. I mean, you guys are asking me some of these questions. Like, gosh, I wish I could answer them. I wish I knew what Ed really was what was going on in his mind. But it's again, I think this is the maturation, like you said, him hooking up with Valerie, and but as a musician, he just really, I think he embraced the studio. He embraced his role.
He never stopped evolving.
Yeah.
As a guitar player.
This is where the evolution really started to kick into high gear. Before that it was kind of like, okay, it was just this, album tour, and kind of let's dig back through our old stuff from the club days until we've run out of things, and maybe I've come up with a few new ideas in between. But this is where it's like, it's almost except for Mean Streets, and even then they did such an incredible modification, hot rodding of that, of Voodoo Queen and She's a Woman, to turn it into an entirely new thing. But it's really where Ed, I think, really just picked up his game, as a guitarist, as a songwriter, and so on. And I think that's, of course, we can't talk about this album without talking about what came next, which is Diver Down. And that was a return to for many reasons. That album wasn't planned. They did Pretty Woman, and it became a huge hit, whereas, they didn't have a pop single, an AM radio top 40 single, where all of a sudden they had Pretty Woman, all of a sudden that became a huge hit. And all of a sudden Warner Brothers like, record, we want a record, get back to the studio, do a record, and they went back to doing their old thing. And of course Ed was burnt, he didn't have time to really write new stuff. He wasn't even in that frame of mind, that I'm going to be writing new material. And sometimes you just need to be, you need to set aside for a little bit. And it was just like, no, go now. And of course, that's why they did so many covers, why there were so many instrumentals, like Cathedral, which was really, again, part of his solo thing. It evolved into this piece on the record. But what we did get on Diver Down was great. The new stuff.
Well, I was going to say, it's a much maligned, that album. And a lot of it is Ed's fault, because he would always go out of his way to shit on that album. Sorry about that.
And he has to appreciate the fact that, I mean, I think it was just because there were so many covers, and that was kind of the beginning of the split. That was the pairing of Ted and Dave versus the Ed and Don dynamic.
Right.
But it was a great thing that, we had this push and pull, and then what did we get next? We got Ed building his own studio and then putting out 1984.
Little Guitars, I mean, that's brilliant. The full
Little Guitars is a great
brilliant.
song. Yeah.
I mean, Hang 'em High was an old demo, I guess.
Yeah, that was an old song dating back, And
I guess they like to play the Kinks, so they threw that on there. But I mean, Secrets was new. I mean, but
Secrets was new and a great song.
Yeah, yeah. But Little Guitars and The Full Bug alone, it's just like those are just brilliant songs. And like I said, it gets maligned a lot because Eddie maligned it a lot too, that album. But those are gems on there too. And like I said,
it's a great record, and especially considering
drum sound progressing.
Yeah, well, everything progressed, even Ed kind of got into a little bit of that, some people love it, some people hate it, but he got more into that kind of chorusy kind of sound, more of a stereo spread on his guitar.
I like the diver down tone.
Yeah, I do too. I think
it's a great tone.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. And again, I think Ed's guitar has it's almost easy to see why he got into keyboards. I mean, he did. He obviously, we just heard, the micro synthesizer, and we had the Rhodes before that on Women and Children First. And then of course, the deep dive into synthesizers on the next record. But it's, his guitar sound was becoming a little bit more synthy, and it had this wide expanse, and his voicings and everything, were more keyboard like. Of course, Cathedral, is really, that's where you're going beyond the guitar a bit. It's kind of like what Jeff Beck does, where it's really not a guitar song, it's a song played on guitar. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I've got these notes and these sounds and everything, and how do I wrench them out of this instrument?
Yeah.
And then you get, the song with their father on it, which was just cool to hear. That is something completely off the wall, totally different. And the jazzy, the old big band, jazzy, their dad playing on it, and then then you can start to put together where that whole shuffle comes from. Is that old jazz music, like the big band that the father used to play? They probably heard that growing up. All that shuffle.
Dave takes the credit on that one too.
Burnt in their heads.
There was always that shuffle beat there. That's the thing. I forgot what I was reading, but there was some song. There was something because I absorb all this stuff all over the place all the time. But there was something where I was saying, "Oh, this is now like they're going into a shuffle or whatever." Again, it was probably, I think, Chuck Klosterman or something like that. And it's like, well, they did shuffles all the time.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's a shuffle. It's like, really, they have this jazz. I mean, my gosh, Alex was a jazz drummer.
Yeah.
And that came from playing with Dad.
Sure.
It came from with Jan out there at the Oompa houses and stuff like that. It's like they just
burnt in their DNA. That
Yeah, it's in their DNA.
Yeah.
That swings.
Exactly. Hey, Chris, Holly Lewis asked the question, if you ever met Don Landy.
Never met him. I did have a brief conversation with him back in 2007. And how I got to him, I can't even remember, because it was like I was trying to get him for the book, and it was just like no go. It's just a bunch of dead ends. I think maybe I had a phone number or something, and that phone number changed or whatever. But it was just basically to verify some stuff about the first album. Like about the reverb and some other things for an article. I was kind of doing a deep dive in that with Ed about, the record and some of the myths about how he recorded the first album, what he was using and that sort of thing. And it was just really to try and set the record straight as much as possible. And he gave some input into that, but it might have even been an email thing, I think, that I sent him, I'm trying to remember, because I couldn't find my tape of it. And that's not something I would have taken lightly and just cast aside. But never actually met him. I mean, I saw that he just appeared. I think that Greg Renoff had a picture of him at with Ted at some event or whatever. And I wasn't sure. I thought the guy might have been in witness protection or something. I'd heard rumors that he just kind of vanished off the face of the earth. And I've as a journalist, I've dug up some little tricks to find people. And I just kept on reaching dead ends. I mean, I used to actually challenge, like, Chris Scapoletti, who's now the editor-in-chief over at Guitar Player magazine. And he would bring up a celebrity name and it's like, find me their address. And I could usually find someone's address within 10 minutes, Wow. And it was just a matter of knowing some of these, not the dark web or anything like that, but just these ways that you can dig around and find stuff, and sometimes it's just, I didn't want to give away my secrets, but there are ways to find people. And with Don, it was like, none of my techniques worked.
Wow.
We saw a picture like 4 or 5 months ago of him and Alex, and they were at some kind of recording studio, and it was a new picture, and it was for Dolby Atmos, how everything's coming up. So I was hoping, it's like, oh, look, maybe they're going to finally remaster these albums in Dolby Atmos, and maybe Don and Alex are going to just check out the technology together, and maybe that's, hopefully something's on the horizon as far as remastering, like even the Sammy years, which never have properly been remastered at all.
No.
And I almost think that was part of Ed being mad at and maybe Alex being mad at Sammy that they were like, well, we're not going to remaster that whole era. Forget it. Like punishing him somehow.
I don't want to tell anybody what to do or anything like that, but I find it just maddening that there's just all this material lying there, and it needs to be looked over and nurtured. And I know it's a big job, but again, I keep on saying, Wolfgang, you don't have to do it yourself. You can hire somebody and they can just, let somebody else filter it for you.
Archive and protect it.
Archive and protect it. And maybe that's being done. I don't know. I'm hoping it's being done, but just hearing him saying that he's not even going to dig into this for like 10 years. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like my beard's getting long, it's going to be down to here by that time.
Right.
If I'm still here, and
I know.
But it's the time to strike is while the iron is hot. It's even with the Led Zeppelin remastered stuff, that was still, wasn't that long after Led Zeppelin had broken up when they had done that, it's
maddening, like you said.
Yeah, it's maddening because it's just even throw us a little bone or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big money making project. I think people, and it's part of keeping Ed alive. It's keeping Ed in the memories of people, and we just we're constantly fighting distractions and this, that, and the other out there, and it's just you have to constantly remind people in this day and age. And the problem is the more time passes, the more people are going to forget. It's kind of like you almost have to be relentless. And it's thanks to you guys, who are out here constantly doing this stuff. That's part of it. It's part of the job. I can only do so many books before the publishers say like, okay, enough.
Right.
And that's even why we did the book, because it was really like it was a kind of a now or never proposition, to be honest. I don't think people realize that, but it really was. Hachette's one of the big 6 book companies out there, and it was. I think we told the story before, but we were working on this book before, before Ed had passed, and the interest was pretty lukewarm. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it was really, the book companies were kind of like, we don't really know, about if we want to do this.
They just don't get it, I don't think.
Yeah, and then of course, a week after Ed passed, all of a sudden, we had 3 of those companies that we had talked to all of a sudden said like about that Van Halen book now.
Right.
Sure.
And we didn't want to be vultures or anything like that, but we also knew that you got to get it while the interest is there.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with the Van Halen fans. Some of us you guys are, pretty young here, and but some of us are getting older, and we're not going to be around forever, and we're trying to get our kids, hooked on this stuff. And that's again why I wrote the book, was I wanted, this again to be like a textbook. Sure. I wanted to be respectful. I didn't want it to be full of a bunch of stuff where someone, in a college course or a high school or whatever is going to say like, this is just full of a bunch of gossipy crap. I wanted it to really be, I wanted to, it's like the books I read growing up that were about Beethoven, Mozart, and Les Paul, and Django Reinhardt, Charlie Parker or whatever. That's the way I wanted to treat this book, Right. It wasn't hey, more wild rock, and here's the dirt part 3 or whatever. It's like, no, I really wanted to, put Ed, in that section along with the Beethoven and Brahms and Mozart, and Louis Armstrong and Django Reinhardt, whatever, just all these greats through history where they're treated with reverence and they're treated with respect, for their contributions and for what they've done.
Yeah. You accomplished that wholeheartedly and 100%.
Thank you. That was the goal. That was really the goal.
Absolutely did.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished. Sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think that the first reasonable thing that we can hope for, though, is a remastering of the whole catalog. They're a box set or so. I mean, that's not going to take. Alex won't have to leave his house. And, no. To do anything. That's a no brainer to do that at this point. You know what I mean? So. But
yeah, it's. I mean, I think to put together just a nice deluxe box set. I mean, if they can find a little snippets here and there, we know that they're out there.
Yeah.
We know there's some of the demo stuff and whatever, and it's like it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's like I look back at like the Jeff Beck Beckology box set, and they had some of those early recordings. They weren't the greatest quality, but that's you're not expecting it to be the 3D THX sound experience.
Sure.
Right.
You want to hear the progress. You want to hear how things come along. and I think they can do that. And I mean, we all know, the diehard fans out there, we've got the bootlegs of the demos, the Warner Brothers demos and the Gene Simmons demos and the stuff from before that from Cherokee. And, and we know that there's other songs out there from time to time that have popped up. And, I know there's stuff from Balance, that I remember seeing the track sheet, and we were just, I was talking with somebody on Instagram about, the photo, because I remember the photographer. I'm gonna have to dig it up because I don't know if I just saw it on the proof sheets or not, but it was like the all the tracks for Balance, and of course I remember Crossing Over was on there, and it's like, well, where was that? Of course it ended up in Japan, but I remember that, and there was a couple other song titles that didn't make it on the finished album. Sometimes the song titles change, but a lot of times there are other songs out there that just didn't make the final cut. We know they're out there, they are,
You're right, they are.
Put out a box set, put out the whole collection, and throw in a couple rarities, and so you get the people like us who already have everything. So we'll buy it again.
Christopher Live Sawa, Chris, in the chat, he made a mention of something I was reading, and I gotta say something about it. He was saying that there's a local cover band who does tributes to Van Halen in his town. They're all less than 30 years old. The drummer's 17.
Wow, cool.
So we're talking about Van Halen reaching generations, 3 generations after the band was a thing.
Yeah, so
as it should be.
That is far-reaching.
Yeah,
far-reaching. So I just wanted to make that.
Yeah, so there is hope. And you know what else? There's I always watch on YouTube. It's always African American people, but they listen to Van Halen for the first time. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those videos. There's a lot of reaction videos, but it's always like African American people, and they're sitting there. And I was watching them last night. Eddie's solo from Live Without a Net, and they were watching this thing, and their jaws just dropped because they'd never heard anything like this before. They're like, "That's a guitar? It doesn't sound like a guitar. I can't believe you could do this on the guitar, like play like a piano, and it's make those sounds out of it." They're like.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, they were like
everybody has that reaction.
Yeah, those videos are fun. If you ever get a chance to check them out, there's a ton of them out there with reactions.
Well, it's kind of the sad thing though, because it's like even you look at just even with funk music. I mean, my gosh, you want to dig up something really cool. Look at some Bootsy videos, man, from like the 70s. And again, you want to talk about it making a bass sound like a flipping spaceship.
Man, I hadn't thought about Bootsy in a long time, man.
Yeah,
it's star-shaped bass, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
There's so much stuff out there that it is yet to be dug up and appreciated, and again, and everything like that. And but yeah, Ed, he's our Mozart of our age.
Yeah. I just hope that they really make an effort to get around. I know it's still fresh. It's not even 2 years yet, but I mean,
I guess the tough thing is for Wolfgang is because he has his career and he wants to do that and establish himself, and he's had to put a good part of his prime years of his 20s aside. Sadly, coping with his dad's problem, and everything like that, and respectfully put his career aside.
Yeah.
To do that. And I can understand why now he just wants to concentrate on himself, because he spent 5 years focused on his dad, and putting his own career on the back burner for that. And it wasn't a selfish thing. Obviously it wasn't a selfish thing because he spent 5 years, looking after his dad and enjoying every moment he could with him. But at the same time, I think he shouldn't bear the burden himself, and I think he can delegate, It's a tough thing for a Van Halen to do, though. I found, is that they're not really good at like passing on, the responsibility to somebody else. They tend to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's very much like that 5150 album cover.
Yes.
Well, ultimately, out of respect for him and the family, I wouldn't expect any more than the remastering of the Hagar side of stuff,
Yeah, I think it's tough because they
Yeah.
did so much re-releasing of the 6-pack as it was,
Right.
During the 2010s, so there was that. I think they had like it came out and then they remastered it again, and it just I think that's a the Hagar years I think definitely need to be dug into. But again, I think the full out box set would be great. But I don't know who buys box sets in this day and age. I don't know. Does anybody buy them?
Yeah.
But those older guys with deeper pockets, I guess. But
I would buy it.
I would buy it too. Guys, they put
Yeah.
together a nice package, and hey, I'll write the liner notes. I'll do them for cheap.
Yeah, about half a minute.
I'm sure Warner Brothers Records is salivating for something like this. You know what I mean? I'm sure that they're like, they're ready. They're ready to, whenever they're waiting for the phone
There's
call.
one thing, and I can't say too much, unfortunately, because it's still in that gestation period. But there may be one thing that's mainstream, and which is very much in with the way people absorb product, so to speak, these days. That we might have Warner Brothers, that will definitely help Warner's out and will kick up a lot of sales. But I can't say too much about it, unfortunately. But we've had some progress in that area, so there may be some hope.
Yeah, well, there has to be at some point. There has to be at some point. Like you said. And like we said, this is an easy thing to do, is especially remastering albums. I mean, it's like that would be a nice starting point. You know what I mean? Just to,
So. Yeah. Well, as Wolf said, and we've uttered those words of his. His dad gave us everything he had. If he had anything left that he thought was good enough, he'd have given it to us already.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of, if we get a remaster of the Sammy stuff, that's what I want. But anything more is just gravy. I don't expect or wouldn't ask for anything.
Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from that, because I think that's the thing, is like this is his work. This is his completed works. The other stuff's the unfinished symphonies, basically.
Right.
But
unfinished symphonies are good too, right, Chris?
Exactly. Hey, some of them are, still performed by orchestras to this day.
That's right, exactly.
I mean, they've come across the pieces of sheet music that were stuck in a bench somewhere, and found like, wow, and I think that's the thing. I mean, hearing people like Steve Vai talking about, Ed playing on this piece of music, and Ed not really having any plans for it, and Vai saying it's some of the most amazing guitar playing he ever heard in his life. And I think that's the thing, is that I think Ed was sometimes his own worst critic, and he may not have thought this is fit for public consumption, but the public out there may go like, wow, this is like steak.
Right.
It is.
That's true. And it strikes me is, like Wolf said something in one of these recent interviews too, is like where his dad was at in the later years, like now songwriting and everything was maybe not what people would have wanted to hear. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that he wasn't the same Eddie Van Halen as, the last time we saw him really in 1998. His like later, the stuff that he was playing or he liked might not have gelled with what.
Well, I think that's the unfortunate thing. And I think that's part of it is when you go, I don't want to put down some of these Van Halen forums out there, but you have some people who just, they kind of drove that madness with him, where, especially with the reception of Van Halen 3, as we go through in the book, and how much we talked about that and how much that really kind of just knocked him for a loop, and everything. And you have these people who just want the same stuff over and over again. They want, 5150 over and over again, or 1984 over and over again, or the first album over and over again.
Well, they really just want to feel that same feeling they had from the last time they got that.
Exactly. It's kind of like, the crack cocaine thing or something like that. They want to get that high that they got from that first time over again, and just it ain't happening, but who knows? I mean, it's the thing. I think that's the thing that Ed kind of started to question himself. But it's like, I want to hear his cello music. I want to hear him play acoustic piano.
Same here, right?
Exactly. Away,
sure.
And I think a lot more people would actually, and I think I'm hoping that the attitudes have come along, and progressed enough that people can start to appreciate that, well, this is where he was at. This was the music that Ed made for himself. This wasn't what he made for the fans. It wasn't for us. I mean, was kind of the challenge of a different kind of truth, was that they kind of really wanted to go back to that, the early days with Roth again and try and relive that magic,
I agree with you. I think he was thrown for between Van Halen 3 and then those 3 new songs in 2004 that people seem to get up and go to the bathroom when they were playing them live, and I think that really burned him. And I think he was just like, he checked out after that, and he's like, well, that's it. Even in your article in Guitar World, with the one where he was with was it Tony Iommi?
Iommi, yeah. Iommi.
Yeah.
That was like really, that was where he was like really down on the
Yeah.
idea of ever doing any new music for people again.
Yeah.
And I fully get that, because that's where, everybody was downloading stuff. I mean, people still do, but no one was buying music.
Right.
And records weren't selling. And I even mentioned in that
But that's where it could have been anybody, but it just happened to have been Gary.
Yeah. And it was a tough time to be a musician too, in the 2000s. It was I know many people, especially I was really heavily involved with the electronic music scene at that time. And I know people who went from selling, 100, 300,000 copies of their record, and all of a sudden they were down to like 20, 25,000.
Right.
And they started to go like, why am I investing all this money in all this expensive gear and doing all this other stuff when I'm not selling enough records to make a living? Yeah. And touring was getting more expensive to do, and there's a lot more insurance hassles and things like that to deal with, and that was a really rough patch for people. Right. And now we've seen kind of things come around a bit, and we've seen much of a more return to live music and that sort of thing. And I mean, merchandising's always been there and everything like that, but the 2000s was just a dark period for people. People was like, where do we go from here? And the old model was starting to dissolve. And I think Ed in particular really felt the brunt of that.
I have a lot of respect for
he was frustrated for
these old classic artists and stuff that we grew up with that are still writing and recording and putting out new music. I have a lot of respect for that because their simple answer is, well, because I'm a musician and this is what I do. People may not want to hear it or buy it, but this is what I do, and I'm going to do it. I don't want to go tour and just play, be a nostalgia act. I'm gonna if I'm going out, I'm gonna play a couple new songs because this is what I want to do. This is where I am, and I have a huge respect for that. So anybody that does that, that takes the time to record a new album, I love it. I think it's great. Regardless if it sells, it's not going to sell anymore. And a lot of them say, listen, I'm going to waste a year of my life recording, paying all this money to record an album. Well, some of them still do it, and I totally get it, and I respect that.
Yeah. I think that the interesting thing too is that I think Ed had come around on that. That's the unfortunate thing, I think, is that unfortunately this sickness, this cancer just unfortunately just kicked his ass.
Right.
But I truly think, when he told me that he really wanted to do another record, and he was just waiting for everybody else to get on the same page with him. But I think he really wanted to do another record. And unfortunately then it just became an impossibility because he was just having to go get, all this therapy and everything and these treatments. And it became impossible,
and probably knocked him out too. He's probably exhausted. He just didn't feel like,
Yeah.
But you have to figure in the period from 2009 or after A Different Kind of Truth, the 4 or 5 years in there, I mean, was he still interested in going up to the studio and jamming with Alex? And I mean, writing songs? Did he still do that kind of stuff? I don't know. I know he still ride motorcycles and do all that kind of stuff. But
there was a lot of that. I think part of it too was just there was also this whole thing. I think why we didn't get another album after A Different Kind of Truth, first of all, was because Wolfgang started working on his solo work. And I think Ed wanted to give Wolfgang the luxury of doing that. So that was part of it where I think where Ed was talking about not having everybody in. First I thought, oh, Dave just wants to go off to Tokyo and get tattoos and do this and do whatever, but I think a lot of it too was Wolfgang, really wanting to spread his wings and make his own musical statement and stand on his own 2 feet, not just be this guy who replaced Michael Anthony. He wanted to do his own musical expression and do something for his generation, and not for his dad's generation. So, Ed put that aside. And then I think when it came time that, the album was basically in the can, it was supposed to come out. And that's, that would have been it would have been great for Wolfgang to do that. In fact, that was even in the later years was the plan was like, they're going to get back together with Mike, and do that tour. And Wolfgang was going to open for the shows, and they're going to do this big stadium tour. but just it would have been interesting to just. I know that Ed was really chomping at the bit there in 2015 to do one more record at least. Like he still had another record in him that he wanted to do with the lineup with Wolfgang and Dave and Alex.
Yeah,
it just unfortunately didn't come to be.
No, that sucks. It just seemed like the last 20 years have gone by so fast, don't they? You know what I mean? It's just like you sit back and you look and you say, wow. I mean, especially when somebody passes away like that, it's just like it's over. Look at that. It's boom. It's like it's amazing when you think about it. But
it's funny because I was like looking at Rosen has this book came out and I've read it, and everything, and I got to read it before it came out, but he was talking about 26 years. It's like yes, Steve, you got the choice years. You got 78, up through 2004, but I got the 26 years on the back end, because I started with that in 1994, up through 2020. So it's like, okay, I had 26 years too. I just realized that like today, actually, I was looking at the title of his book. And it's like 26 years with Ed or whatever. It's like, well, gosh, I had 26 years with Ed.
Right.
I just didn't have the, 1980. I wasn't there during 1984 or, the first album or any of that stuff. The years that everybody is just, those are magical years.
Right.
But I think the latter years are magical too, because Ed was more mature.
It's all magic, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It is all magic, and I think that's the thing. And Ed had matured and he'd sobered up and everything. I think that's the one frustrating thing about the Rosen book. Aside from the personal stuff that I don't think should have been printed, just that's my own thing. But it's also the fact that Ed was kind of out of his mind, high a lot of the time. And I had dealt with Ed in that frame of mind, during the dark years that we called them. Right. And that was very tough. It was very tough. And you couldn't tell which Ed you were going to get and whether even Ed knew which Ed he was going to be and whether it was even Ed, whether it was really him. And I felt like the more honest picture of Ed really emerged, after 2008, where he really had accepted things and come to, he didn't feel the need to bullshit anymore. He was an adult and he had his accomplishments and there was no reason to embellish things or to paint this other picture or whatever. That I think he was more honest and open by that point.
Yeah, it's a shame that, but like we said when we talked about the book and you guys were on here, that redemption was a huge part of the story, though. That at the end, the last chapter of his life there was the redemption. It kind of it could have ended a lot differently. You know what I mean? And a terrible, but he left us with a good feeling about him. You know what I mean? It's like
during the 2010 through 2020, Ed was just a great guy to be around.
Right.
It was really, it was just a great experience, to be around him, even, 2009, part of 2008, he had a little bit of his problems, 7, 08. But after that, just, once he really cleaned up his act, he just really became just this great person. And he just know that was the person that Ed really was. That was the person that Ed was, when he was a shy young teenager, and developing his voice on the instrument and everything like that, and that person that you've seen throughout, and it just, these demons caught a hold of him at these different periods and everything like that. But at this point, he had rid himself of them. And that was what's the great refreshing thing about him at that period was.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not the ending we all would have wanted, but at least, like I said, that redemption counts for something. It was a much better ending than it could have been,
Yeah.
If you look back 15 years, you wouldn't have thought that, he would have had this kind of ending because, I always thought, hey, well, this guy's never going to be able to. Some people can never get a control of themselves. You know what I mean? They just, addiction is like, and who did anybody think after all these years, 30 something years that he would actually be able to put it together? I mean, that's kind of amazing that he was able to actually do that. You know what I mean? After all these years, So,
and I think that just shows what inside really and deep down what a good person he was, and people will ask for various drama.
What a loving family and people he had around him who, a lot of, I'm not trying to take away from what Ed accomplished overcoming those things, but to say he would have done it without an army of people supporting him.
Well, it was actually really, it was two people. It was Janie and Wolf.
Yeah, and I was just going to go there, Chris. I think,
I shouldn't take liberty to say this because but Janie did the hard work. Janie.
Oh yeah.
She was at the right time. She was there at the right time for her to be there.
Yeah, Ed needed somebody when she came along, and but he was Eddie Van Halen, and who was she? But she's a strong woman, and she's the one who really saw that him go through rehab a couple times and it didn't hold, and she's the one who really, I don't know how she did it, but she's the one who got him to clean up his act, who really just straightened him out, and part of that was doing that for his son, and that was the thing. And it's just like, you don't want to blow what you've got going on here with the band back together. And you guys are off on these, really successful tours and everything. But you weren't going to be able to keep that if you're going back to your old ways, but those two together basically really saved his life and gave us a longer time with him than we would have had otherwise.
Yeah. I don't think she gets enough credit for that. A lot of people, there's all, people say things, but she was hugely important. I mean,
yeah, I will say this because, she can't, unfortunately. But she really, deserves a lot of credit. I mean, more than people can imagine, it's really, and it's sad that, she can't write a book,
Hey, Chris, in your next book, maybe you throw a little kudos her way.
We did what we could in the book, but it's a tough situation to go into, because it's really off the record stuff, and it's really I'm a little worried here. I may be going even too far with what I'm saying, but it's kind of a private matter.
Sure.
But she definitely, I will give her credit.
Absolutely.
The woman deserves it. She deserves nothing but respect, and anybody who badmouths her in any way doesn't know Janie Lazuski, however you say her last name, Janie Van Halen, I'll call her that, but she really was a special person in Ed's life, and I'm a little bit upset with what Valerie said recently, about things that she shouldn't have gone there, and the thing is that Janie can't go there.
Right. Exactly.
So it was really kind of like a low blow to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And considering, looking in from the outside, the fact that he could never do this, for years and years. And then she was there. And so whatever she did, I mean, it worked, obviously, you know what I mean?
It definitely worked. I mean, she did the hard work that nobody wanted to do and nobody could do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it was, anybody who's had to deal with anybody kicking an addiction knows it's not a walk in the park by any means.
No.
All the unseen work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she deserves definitely a great thank you and a lot of credit for for helping, for that, making that sad ending not as sad as it could have really have been.
Yeah, no, definitely,
But but listen, so I want your next book. I want Don Landy. All right, get that guy, Chris. That's the one I want to hear from. He's the guy that I want to hear from.
Yeah, well, I am gonna have to have a no holds barred match with Greg Renoff over that one, I think. But
right.
But and Greg's a good guy. I think he could do a highly capable job himself.
Right. Well, he's got an in with Ted, right? So let's go. Somebody's got to.
I think that's the way to get Don. But I don't think Don's going to talk. I kind of get the feeling he's been quiet for all these years, and I just think he's, I could get him to talk about reverb, at Sunset Sound, but about the EMT plates and what have you, but and a few other little minor details. I couldn't even really get him to go into about miking techniques or any of that stuff. It's just kind of like, so I don't know what.
Did you guys see the new video, the Sunset Sound mic placement and amp placements from Van Halen 2?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
Came out today.
Yeah. Came out today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Came out today.
Speak of the devil.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a shame because as another historical document, Landy could shed a lot of light. It doesn't have to be gossipy or anything like that.
No, I don't want it to be gossipy. I just kind of want to know,
I would want it to be like your book. You know what I mean? Like that. Just tell the story of how those sounds were achieved and stuff like that, and just and the process that they went through. You know what I mean? And just
Well, that's the thing. Like Ed couldn't tell, how was this done? Sometimes
Right.
it's just like that was Don, and
Yeah. I mean, and he's a hugely important part because look at like the end of Drop Dead Legs, that outro, that was all Don. Ed says it, and you guys in 2004 when you guys did that 30th anniversary in Guitar World of 1984,
right.
He said he goes that we didn't have an ending, that we just ended it at that spot, and he goes and Don had us jamming and it fit, so he just spliced the tape, and spliced that ending on there, and it just worked perfectly, and I overdubbed the solo and I mean that's incredible.
Yeah,
it's like
the other thing is like the whole Beat It story. Is
the SMPTE code and all that stuff.
Well, the thing, and the thing was like with Lukather, that surprised me more than anything because it's like Ed's told the story and it sounds you hear Ed tell the story and you think like Michael Jackson sitting on one side and Quincy Jones is on the other, and then you come to find out from Lukather that they weren't even there, which it makes sense because it's like, do you think Quincy and Michael are going to let him cut up a master tape?
I know,
to rearrange the song, and everything, and it makes sense that they went to Sunset Sound, and Ed rolled in, and I think I from what I can tell, he rented an amp, or whatever, and brought his guitar down, and spent a couple hours, and they were done, But it's kind of turned into this mythological thing of like, well, either Michael's in the adjoining studio, or he's sitting there with Ed, or whatever, and it's like, gosh,
you heard so many stories. You heard Michael Jackson was down the hall doing with Steven Spielberg doing a voiceover
thing,
both way, and they say that he rented the amp from Andy Brower from the rental place in LA.
Right.
That's one story. The other story is that he was playing an amp with Alan Holdsworth, a combo amp or something.
Right.
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 I forget what kind it was. It wasn't a Dumble. It was something like that Holdsworth was using. I think it was solid state too, wasn't it, or something crazy like that?
Yeah, that was a solid state amp that he was using. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I've read that story too, and it doesn't hold much credence. Unfortunately, the Andy Brower thing does, and I think just even somebody has the somewhere.
Lukather there?
No, Lukather wasn't there either, though.
No.
So that's the thing. It was just like they handed the tapes over to Ed and Don, and they went and did their thing, and then they got it back, and the tape was all cut up.
We had always heard that no one was there, and Quincy came in later, and Ed said, "I hope you don't mind. I'm all done," and I kind of rearranged the last part of your song.
That's pretty much what the story Lukather tells, and that makes the most sense because it's really I can't see Ed and Don cutting up the master tape with
either Michael. Don would cut up a tape with the SMPTE code on it, knowing that they're probably linking like 224 track, 2 or 3 or whatever they did back then. I mean, to make all the tracks.
But I don't think that was Don's forte though. That's the thing though. I think Don was used to the old school, just hey, we've got one tape and this much, and he had to know what SMPTE was, but he may have just not really understood how it worked, maybe, and thought, so
maybe Ed wasn't hearing what he had previously heard, and is why he made those changes.
Well, they say that Ed didn't even know this whole story until years later, I guess. I don't know. That's what I had heard too, that he didn't know the whole thing about the SMPTE thing until years later. I guess Lukather and
I'm sure Lukather told him like one of the bowl sessions, hanging out, that Lukather probably like they both had a few drinks and like, you cut the tape up. Do you know what I had to do?
I mean, Jeff Porcaro didn't even have a click track to play to. I guess I mean, that's how good of a drummer that guy was. He was like, metronome, right? I mean, and they rebuilt the track, basically saved it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a crazy story,
But that makes much more sense. And to me, it's a more interesting story than having Michael and Quincy in the studio with them.
Yeah. Right, it definitely.
I mean, but that whole track has become so mythologized because there's even a video I saw of oh gosh, I can't remember I can't remember anybody's names anymore, but the main engineer on the Michael Jackson stuff,
Bruce Swedien, right?
Bruce Swedien was talking about and the solo was finished and the speakers blew up in flames, the Westlake monitors or whatever, and it's like,
and Michael Jackson was playing on a road case. The drum thing right before the solo starts.
Right. I believe that, and that sort of thing. But the speakers, even Lukather said like, what?
Yeah, right.
No.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
But it's, that's what I said about those early days. There was so much mythology and everything like that. And in the latter days, I think we started to get more of the different kind of truth, the real kind of truth,
The real truth, right? Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. Well, Well, there's many more books I think that can be written.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's just a matter of who will publish them and who will buy them.
Yeah, that's it.
That's true.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I just wish we'd get it all documented. I wish Don Landy would either sit down with somebody, even to archive it. You know what I mean? Just not even put it out somewhere. Just said someday,
yeah, no, I fully agree, and believe me, he's been like I would actually rather talk with Don than there's a couple of guitarists on my bucket list I haven't talked to, like Brian May and Joe Perry, whatever. But I put Don at the top of that list. He's really the guy that I've had wanted to talk to, and like I said, I just was convinced that we were working on the book, and Brad was bugging me like, can you track down Don? I'm like, I'm getting nothing here.
All right.
And that, like you said, that picture of the Dolby Atmos thing, that was just like kind of like, wow, that was like, he's
shocking, right?
He's not a myth,
No,
he's
right?
not witness protection with a new face and
I was all excited. Yeah, we were all excited when you saw that because it was like, oh, something's going on. Him and Alex are there. Something, it's got to be something with the remastering of the albums in Dolby Atmos or something,
But even Ed said, he tried to get Don back. See, I think he said in the 1984 interview, he tried to get back together with Don to work on stuff, and Don was just like, I'm just not doing that anymore. Yeah. So
I had heard that he was like his IQ. He was like a genius, electrical engineer type of genius. And I think he went on to do other things, that interested him that had nothing to do with music, but it had to do with his, his intelligence. I don't know what he was doing, but it was.
I could totally see that. That's the thing that we, people don't realize about the old school recording engineers is that those guys were actually engineers.
Yeah.
Today you've got people who call themselves producers and engineers or whatever, and all they know how to do is push a button on a sampler or whatever, but guys like Don, and guys like Leif Mosses and some of these other people I know, that they could take apart a console, like a watchmaker, like every single piece, or like a sniper with his rifle, he could take apart every single piece blindfolded and put the thing back together again, and make it better, in the process of doing that.
I always use 1984 as a perfect example because it's just like, how did that he make that album sound as good as it does? And that tiny, at that time, the studio was even smaller. It was before the drum room. It was drums, a couple overheads over the, rototoms. I mean, and just listen to the sound of that album. I mean, and the guitar tone, it's just like, how is that possible that he got it to sound that good? It's incredible the way that album, to me, that album sounds, the Sunset Sound guys, I put a couple comments in there that, I like Alex's drum sound better in the later years. I don't really care for his album on the first album. I don't think it has his voice on, you don't hear it on, I wish that the drum sound and like, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge or Balance, was available at the time when they did the first album. I just think that the drums, basically the guitars, I think they're, I always define classic as something that never goes out of style. That's classic, something that never goes out of style. Ed's guitar throughout his career, to me, it's classic. It never goes out of style. The first album, everything, it's fine. But if you want to me, those drums kind of sounded a little dated. That kind of, it's like 70s kind of, listen to the Eagles albums. They were, the British versus American style. Listen to Zeppelin with the big room ambient sound.
Exactly.
Like the Eagles, where it sounds like he's hitting cardboard boxes. You know what I mean? It was just like, plate, and there's too much plate reverb on the drums on Van Halen 1. But the
no bass.
Guys, they didn't like my comment on that, but just, I mean, for that kit that he used on 1984 with those two Simmons drums, Simmons floor toms, rototoms.
Rototoms, I love rototoms. Yeah,
but just it's incredible the sound that they got on that album.
Yeah, so. No, absolutely. No, I think it's and again, it's just, I mean, but there's this deification. I mean, of the other stuff, and we all, I love the first album as much as anything. I mean, Ed's guitar sound on that's just still phenomenal. The sound on Eruption just is like still, just it gets the goosebumps going. But yeah, I think there was something about, when Ed really found his voice, in the studio and everything. And I mean, again, Fair Warning, which we just listened to tonight, is an example of that blossoming. And you even hear, I mean, you hear bass on that record.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. It's a much more things to have room to breathe, in there. And yet it's got all these overdubs.
Right.
That's, whereas the other stuff is just a band, pretty much going all out with a minimum amount of overdubs. This has a lot of overdubs, but it actually has more space.
Yeah.
on the record. Things have more room to breathe, and then as a result, it sounds bigger. Unchained sounds huge.
Yeah,
exactly.
It sounds bigger than any of the live in the studio stuff, done before that point.
Yeah, well, it's so cool that throughout their career, the progression from that band, just that uncontained energy, and those first couple albums, it was just like, and it was just them in the studio, just live, basically ripping it, and then just seeing how it progressed, to the later albums where.
Well, you're right about Unchained, Chris. That's that. Yeah,
That
was
whole
the
album, really.
worst.
Yeah, but it's again, 1984. It's like it's one of the biggest home studio recordings
ever, right?
You've got that in Boston, I think, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. I just don't, I think that album breathes, maybe because also because when we first got it on vinyl, it was a short album too, so I guess that helped with the fidelity of it. What I mean?
Definitely, yeah.
But I just, I mean, to this day, to me, it holds up. You listen to like the remastered version of like 1984, it just kicks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even the Simmons kick drums, like on 5150, obviously he was using them and the toms. And 5150 doesn't sound nearly as good to me as 1984. It just doesn't.
Let me ask you this, both of you guys. The way they did things until Ed built the racquetball court was a certain way. But when they built that, things changed for the good in a lot of ways, but some maybe not so good for everybody, but it was different between all of them.
Yeah, well, it was different.
Ted and Don included.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, I think. Again, that's Fair Warning was the precursor. Was really the prelude to 1984. Driver Down was kind of a step back to the old ways, but again, it was Ed, the maestro. Locking himself up. And having the freedom, again, embracing the studio. Embracing the concept of doing overdubs and production, and doing the comping of his solos and that sort of thing. It was no longer just like, okay, we're going to do our live set, or do the stuff live and, nip and tuck a little bit here and there. And then Dave, you're going to come in and do your vocals, and then we're going to do some background vocals, and then it's going to go off for mixing and we're done.
Right.
This was really, the studio became Ed's next instrument, by 1984. That was the thing. And that was just like, and he mastered it just like he mastered the guitar, basically.
Yeah. Well, I always wondered why he had nothing left after how brilliant Fair Warning was, why there was nothing left in the tank for Diver Down.
It's, I think, because they had to go off. They went on an even bigger tour. The tours just kept on getting bigger.
Diver Down was rushed too.
With the song coming out and doing well, I get it, but you seemed like Ed may have had a whole pocket full of goodies.
You would hope and you would think, but I think the plan was really like, gosh, we've been going, pedal to the metal for 4 albums and 4 tours here, and the plan was to take an extended break finally.
And then real life took over, and the guy got married, so it's not like he could sit and play guitar 24 hours a day.
That's the other thing that was in there, was that he had, I don't want to call it a distraction, but that was something else that was going on in his life. So his focus became a little bit different during his downtime. And
did he play more piano at that time, starting after he met her?
Oh, absolutely. And you have to remember too that he was busy. It was more after Diver Down that he really became busy. But all of a sudden he started doing, the soundtrack work, and of course the Michael Jackson thing, and hanging out with Alan Holdsworth and making plans to produce an album with him and everything like that. So he was starting to really spread out. And that was, I think that was the thing about Diver Down, was just, it was just album tour. And he wanted to spend a little bit longer time on Fair Warning. And I think that's what he was anticipating once they came off that tour, was that, I'm going to get an extended break. So I'll just not worry about writing songs while we're on tour now. I'll just be in the moment. And of course they came off and, they wanted something new, and they did, Pretty Woman. I mean, they were going to do Dancing in the Streets. That wasn't working out. They did Pretty Woman. All of a sudden it became a big hit. And all of a sudden it's like record labels just pressuring him, album. We need it now, do it, and
I don't even think he had enough the time that he really wanted to do 1984 too, because I guess they came off that South American tour in early '83.
Yeah.
And then April, I think they started recording 1984. I think they did Jump in like April of '83, but then that US Festival took apparently a ton of time, out from that. So basically they had to pause the album recording of 1984, I think there. And I don't think it seems like before it really got rolling again was almost like late summer, right before or early fall, before they really went like all in on it. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
then you have to remember that the studio still wasn't finished.
Right.
That's the other thing. So it wasn't really quite ready for prime time just yet.
So it seems like September all the way up to December. Like that's why the stories about Don taking the tapes and leaving at the back gate when Ted would show up. And I mean, I guess Ted wanted the tapes. I mean, in Renoff's book, he even says that they were going to use another copy to try to master it off that they had of it or something like that. Because they didn't know what Don was going to do with bury the tapes in his yard or something like that. It was like, he thought they were going insane, these guys up there. But I don't think they, up to the last minute, I think they were like putting finishing touches on that album, I think it pushed it back a week later than they really wanted to release.
They pushed it back a week later on the release date. And it was just, I think Ed was just like, he called the shots. It was his studio, right. The way he saw it, it was just like, I'm not putting this thing out till it's ready. I will not drink any wine before it's time. Orson Welles line, kind of thing. It just, but yeah, it was, I don't know if I'd say it was rushed per se. I think he finally had the luxury to do things the way that he wanted to.
Right.
And I think that was the thing, was just, he wasn't going to submit as easily to the pressure. Right. That was being put on him by the outside forces, by the people at Warner Brothers and by Ted and whoever. And again, I think he had Don as kind of his protective buffer there, who was, part of the studio family, outside the band, but that was just, the buffer between him and Ted. And, Ted, of course, being, entrenched with the record label with Warner Brothers. So it was...
I always got the feeling that when they had an actual producer working on the album, like Andy Johns or Bruce Fairbairn, that it was more of a band effort. Like they're actually, Mike, I think, played more on those albums than was the real producer. And I also think that Ed even said at one point, he's like, we kind of need that, because if we're left to our own devices up here, we'll never get anything done. You know what I mean? So I think that's even why on the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, I think that's why Ted kind of came into the scene, because it was just like, okay, guys, it's like, let's do this. It's got to get done. Let's go.
Yeah, he was getting off the rails, and they could have just kept on going.
Right. Andy Johns was apparently, one of the boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was just like, so I think that's why Ted was in there to rein it in. But I just always got the feeling that Ed, Michael Anthony didn't play on this or that. I think the album where there were real producers, I think Michael Anthony actually played on those albums, was there playing.
Yeah, well, I think on For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, that's definitely, and you can hear it, and like I said, I think it's really, I think there's bits and pieces in 1984, but I think it's, for the most part,
right,
it's still Mike, on it. So it's, but of course.
That's a good question I want to ask you. So to me, it's like, Girl Gone Bad seems like just a live jam. I feel like all three of them had to be playing that at the same time. You know what I mean? I don't know.
It sounds like it to me. I mean, it just, especially, as we've mentioned this before, that tape that's out there, that kind of the early thing of it sounds like it's just Ed now working on it, but it's one of those songs where I don't think Ed could really sit down there and do it in a piecemeal fashion. I think it's just one of those things that he just had to do it.
And there's like a little spot on Girl Gone Bad. It's like, it's a little bit off. I don't know if you're talking about the bass where, that part I'm talking about. And it's a little bit off. So it's like, it seems like it was done live. Like, the bass, they didn't go fix it or anything like that. So, I don't know. I feel like that's definitely Mike was probably playing on that. And you know what? I think he's like criminally underrated because of all the smack that was talked about him. You know what I mean? But
well, that's the thing.
He can play like some of that stuff. If you listen to the bass line, like in Girl Gone Bad and stuff like that, it's just like, it's pretty cool. It's like he's doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he's a very, I mean, again, the demos, the Warner Brothers demos, the bass playing is much more prominent, and you can really hear what Mike's doing. Right. You listen to recordings, the live recordings, the San Diego recording what was it, October 6th, I think 79. I was at that show, and I, you know, found that on YouTube, and it's like, wow, Mike's playing some really awesome stuff here. I remember him being good, you know, when I saw him, but it's like going back and hearing it after all these years, it's like, yeah, he really was a great bass player, you know, and you hear him branch out, you know, and I think part of it is that, you know, some people in the press back then didn't like Mike, and that kind of led to, you know, they goaded Ed into smack talking him. And, you know, when Mike had his moment on stage, he didn't go up there and do a Stanley Clarke bass solo. He just kind of did a crazy showmanship thing. You know, it was really just kind of it was all for show. You know, it's just he was up there making noise, and then it developed into the whole Jack Daniels shtick and all that.
Dropping his bass off the top of the stacks and just letting it hit the floor.
Exactly. It was really just, you know, it was just Michael Anthony the showman. It wasn't Michael Anthony the bass prodigy, you know, kind of thing. And
I would point to songs though, like "Girl Gone Bad." I mean, even if you listen on, like, you can't hear his bass on OU812, but that song, like AFU, like when Ed's doing the solo, that bass that Mike, that little those runs that he's playing in behind the solo and AFU, it's just like, man, I wish that was louder. It's like,
yeah,
he can play. It's like, you know, it's I don't know.
That's the thing. I mean, I think something said, like, you know, Ed said at certain periods he didn't like the way Mike's bass sounded, but I don't think that was really Mike's fault.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, starting with the first album, is that just Mike kind of got mixed out, you know, of the thing, because he could play. I mean, we know he can play. I mean, you know, when we've seen it with Chicken Foot and all these other things that he's done, he can play, you know.
Yeah, you play. Look at those, like when he's doing those 16th notes with his fingers. It's like on Pound Cake. I mean, for the duration of that song, that's not easy to sit there and do this for like that steady, like, you know, for 4 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. I feel bad that he's, you know, and I'm sure it does bother him. You know, I'm sure it does. You know what I mean? It has to. He's human. You know.
Yeah.
I mean?
Well, exactly. You know?
Yeah.
And he's such a good guy that he just doesn't let it. You know.
No,
doesn't go out there, and, you know, and to his credit, he doesn't make a big deal about it. You know.
No, he doesn't, and he protects the legacy of Van Halen better than anybody. You know what I mean? He will not. You know, he'll never crack and tell you how he really feels. He'll never write a book. I don't think, that guy. You know what I mean? It's just
no,
not interested. So, which is great in a way. It's great.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
Yeah.
Well, gents, I should probably call it a night. So I got deadlines. I still do my Guitar World work to do. So,
Chris, you are so awesome.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you
so much.
It's a pleasure. It's always good to talk. I can go on all night about this stuff, but I'll be on with you guys again here, I'm sure.
Yes,
Chris Gill, everybody.
Thank you, Chris.
Definitely. Thanks, Chris, so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Right.
Have a good night, Chris. Thank you.
Man. Awesome as usual, Chris.
Good to see you.
Thanks, you too. You guys, again, thanks for keeping it going, keeping the fire burning.
And we look forward to what's next from you too. So
absolutely.
When you figure it out, let us know.
Okay, well, definitely. You'll be the first to know. So.
All right, great.
Thanks.
All right, Chris. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks. Well, that was awesome.
Man, that is so cool.
He is awesome, isn't he?
My goodness.
You know what's cool? He's just a fan like us, man. You know what I mean? He's just like, you know, he's passionate about this like we are. That's awesome. And I think everybody, like Holly and Nelson, you guys, and KXM Rock, you know, you're right on. He is awesome. He really is. He's great to have on. Anytime he's on any show, it's like, oh man, you got to tune into that.
Absolutely.
You know? So,
yeah.
Thanks again. And that was fun going through the album with him. I thought it was really cool listening to that, you know, and listening to him talk about it too. So,
yeah. So we hope you enjoyed this, this new thing, this interactive listening party. And we're going to do this again.
That's right.
Soon. We'll say that there is diving down on fair warning.
Excellent.
So we can listen to music and all kind of stuff with you guys now. Yeah. So we are going to have another live listening party here in a couple of weeks from
Yeah,
now. Couple of weeks
another good one.
coming down the pipeline with another piece of audio that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to dig,
Mm-hmm.
and with another special guest
Who
who
you
you
really gonna
might
dig?
dig or you might really dig.
Yeah,
You're gonna dig.
you're definitely gonna dig it. Gonna be
Um,
another great show.
but that was fun though. So,
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, everybody like
um,
that in the chat? Did it work for you guys?
yeah, so eh, Fair Warning is a
Holly liked
piece of
it, right?
music that we can easily access, and we can all listen along.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool having it go on in the background while we're just chatting about it.
Well, yeah, I went out and muted my audio, and you can't hear
No,
any of the panel's audio. So
no,
mission accomplished. There
that's
you
it.
go.
You're not going to be in jail, Tony.
Yeah, but so we can listen to music together now. That's awesome.
Yep.
Um, that is awesome. Yeah.
Holly's hanging in for the trivia. She's hanging on for the trivia, Tony.
I'm a win tonight. If you're waiting for trivia, you might as well go to bed because
Check
I've
out that
already
coffee
won.
mug, guys.
Uh-oh, here we go.
This is from the Tinkerman collection from Holly Lewis. Let me see if I can get that right there. And then we also have this one here, and it spells out Eddie Van Halen. If you look at it.
All right.
Absolutely cool, Holly. I love it. Right there, girl. Very cool.
Shaboom. Right on. All right. So who is gonna? None of you are gonna get this tonight. Um. All right. So if any of you kids, I don't think that we have given any of these away yet. And only us here have these. But since we're doing something new here tonight, for trivia, we're going to throw you
Yeah, man.
one of these suckers. It is a Halenville Live All Access staff with the flame on it. And
Nice.
that is for the back. Look at the back.
So cool. Thank you, Sandra.
Man, how freaking cool. You get the lanyard with it. I'll mail it to you tomorrow. You find a email address down below, trivia winners email. We'll direct you to me and email me your stats, and I'll mail you. This is that's a cool one.
Love it.
We haven't given away any of these yet. So kiddos, we got some.
Hey,
We
shout
got
out to
some.
Gary Big G Tholander in the chat. It's good to see
Where
you,
is he
Gary.
at? Where is he at? There he is. Big G.
Right there, Big G.
Right on. All right. So who is gonna win Van Halen Trivia for tonight, February the 9th. I got a good one.
It's a
I
good
don't
one.
think any of them are going to get it, Charles.
No, they're a tough bunch, Tony. They're a tough bunch. Very savvy.
You can't
I
Google
will
this.
never bet against the chat.
You cannot Google the.
I didn't
Can't
know it.
Google this.
I didn't know it.
All right. Let's go there. You ready, kids?
Good luck, you guys.
Ooh. All right. So, unless you know, you know. But if you don't know,
You don't know.
you might have a hard time finding out. All right. Are we ready? Here we go.
Let's do this.
Get ready tight. Get ready to think. We'll give them how many? We're 2:20 in. We'll go another 10 minutes before we call it a night. But here's your trivia question for tonight. Van Halen Trivia coming at you right now. How did David Lee Roth break his wrist in 1998?
They're scrambling, Tony. They're scrambling. The answer to this was actually all over the media at the time when it happened.
No hints. How did David Lee Roth break his wrist in 1998? No hints.
They're coming in.
All right. So while they're coming in,
Holly, that's a good one, Holly.
while we're not giving them any hints, let's recognize the fact that we like guitar picks around here. So if you want guitar picks made that's got your stuff on them, I know a guy.
Yeah, he
All
knows a
right.
guy.
Got a
And
guy.
this is
He got a
his
guy.
stuff, and he's done work for a lot of people. As you see, his links are down below. Legend Picks. You want a guitar made? I'm getting one made right now. Neil Daly, Daily Custom Designs. His links are down below. If you like the cigar style Van Halen guitars, right there, as beautiful as they
Very
are.
custom.
Goodness. Wow. Brendan B. Squared handcrafts these beauties. His links are down below. You can find them. Those of us with ink on our body, ink the original, essential tattoo care daily. High grade formulas with organic ingredients to hydrate and protect environment and reef safe they are. Fight the fade. Take care. Take care. All right. Let's see where we any good answers.
Oh,
Not
there's some
seeing.
good answers, but not the correct ones.
I'm not seeing. All right. We'll let them ponder a little bit. Let's um let's show it one more time. All right. So I take it that you're having a hard time finding the answer.
I'll be right back, guys.
All right. We're seeing a lot of answers, but not the correct one. We'll keep an eye there on things until we wrap up here. So, John, what'd you think of this interactive listening party?
It worked for me. I thought it was pretty cool listening to it in my ear as you know, listening to the talk. You know, it was cool. You know,
Yeah,
what'd you think? What'd you think?
I love the idea. And this is a brainchild of that guy right there. Ha ha! Gotcha.
Something
Yeah,
different,
dude, I
right?
love the idea. Um,
Well, you know what? It helps when you got a guest as great as Chris too. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it definitely
yeah.
does.
Well, yeah, he helped us introduce this. And like we say, we have another one planned for a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah,
Um,
and that should
we,
be another great one.
yeah, we got goodies happening next Wednesday here. Also, we'll not let the cat out of the bag on that one either. Um, but yes, took the words right out of my mouth, Sandra. Thank you, Sandra. Um, yeah, John, this has been a lot of fun, bro.
Yeah.
Um, I can't wait to do the next one, and we're not going to tell anything about what piece of music it's going to be. But you know, we could go deep. This could be any type of Van Halen audio.
Yeah.
Hold on to your hats. We're going we're going to be diving deep on some cool stuff in the
Diving
future.
down.
Diving down. Um, yeah,
No.
I'm gonna show that card on our way out the door in just a little bit.
What's one?
Everybody in the chat,
The
have a
new
great week. Charles Green, John Conklin, always a blast, fellas. Um, yeah, so before I forget, yeah, I've got something that's going to happen here in just a little bit. It's it's there. It's made it. The eagle has landed. Yeah. Um, so we'll keep you posted. Neil will keep you posted, I'm sure. Um, in between now and then, whenever then is. Um, but yeah, it'll look something like that, right?
Very cool.
Mm,
Very cool.
yeah. All right. And that is for another day and another time. We got the Wolfgang Dirty Honey Tour starting in just a couple of more weeks.
About 7 weeks. How long we're waiting to
That's
go
for our
for
show.
our show, Tony. Yeah.
But
Seven.
this tour starts the 20th,
Yeah.
Sunday the 20th in Denver. And that is just a couple more weeks, 2, 3 weeks. Um, yeah, we're
Very
there.
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, yeah, hopefully those dates will stay intact, and there they are. Um, yes.
Hey, I want to say hey to Adam. Adam Roach has been in the chat. I want to just give him a shout out.
Adam, nice to see you, dude.
Right there, Adam.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, John?
That's all I got.
All righty. All right. So, any last words there, Charles Green?
Don't forget, you guys, here in Halenville, it doesn't matter whether you go north, south, east, or west. Every road leads straight to Van Halen. Have a great week. Be well. Rock on.